Okay, well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the April 7th, 2021 Executive Council meeting. Good morning, councilors. Good to see you. We have, as I would say, a full room, but as full of a room as we have had in over a year. So it is good to see everyone being able to participate in a safe way here without any new crowds. But obviously, the best part of the council meetings is that they're public, right? So to get more public involved is always a good thing. Just logistically, as we kick things off, I want to remind folks that they have phones, just be sure to silence them. We're still not doing proclamations or some of the music that we normally kick our meetings off with. We're not quite there yet, but hopefully we will be in the next coming months. So we're going to forego those events as we get things started. We also have an item from the Business Finance Authority today, just as a note, which is subject to a public hearing. So if there are any members of the public who wish to speak on these items, I think there's two. Is there two? Is there just one? Okay, so just one item. Just note that if you are attending virtually over the phone, you can raise your hand, as they say, or ask to speak by pressing 5* when it comes time to address those items. And normally that is one of the first items we'll take up as part of our regular agenda. So for those any members who wish to speak at the public hearing, just press 5* when it is time to address each item. With that, Councillor Kenny, how are you?
I'm doing well.
Good. You want to lead us off with a reading of the pledge?
Yes, absolutely. Great. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
do you mind? That'd be great.
Everyone stand up. We like to pray and stand up and pray, right? Okay. Bow your heads. Dear mighty God, thank you that you hear and answer our prayers. Hear our prayer and be in the midst of our meeting today. Thank you that your presence calms the troubled sea of life and speaks peace to our souls. Give us clear minds and peaceful hearts as we gather today. According to your abundant mercy, you have caused us to be born again into a living hope by the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. May we live in the light of your salvation, experiencing the freedom that is ours in you. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Councilor. Okay, so I think we'll get right into it. Let's first begin officially calling the meeting of the Governor and Executive Council to order. And I'll begin by asking for a motion to approve the meeting minutes from the March 24th, 2021 Governor and Council meeting.
So moved.
Is there any discussion or changes to those meeting minutes? Okay, hearing none, all in favor of approving the meeting minutes as submitted, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The meeting minutes are approved. Next, from the Office of the Secretary of State, we have our civil commissions. Could I please have a motion to confirm the list of civil commissions?
Second.
All those in favor of the list of civil commissions, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? With that, the list of civil commissions is approved. Are there any names to place onto the list of civil commissions for the next meeting? Councillor Kenny.
Thank you, Governor. I have 3 notaries I'd like to place in nomination. Michael Wayne of Bristol, New Hampshire. Secondly, I have Erica Kelly of, I'm trying to think of the town, Alton, New Hampshire. And lastly, I have Tom Spalding. I just have to find this town here. And I believe that is Conway, New Hampshire.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you.
Any other names to place on the list? Okay. Hearing no additional names, the matter of civil commissions is concluded. We have a variety of different resignations to accept today. We'll begin with the Director of the Division of Water for the Department of Environmental Services. Could I please have a motion to accept the resignation of Tom O'Donovan?
So moved.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The resignation of Mr. O'Donovan is approved. As the State Fire Marshal for the Division of Fire Safety and the Department of Safety, could I please have a motion to accept the resignation of Paul Parisi of Salem?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Councilor Kenny.
This is a sad day when I heard the news that Paul Parisi was stepping down as State Fire Marshal. He replaced Bill Dagan, who's also a friend of mine. Paul was really a great asset to the state and to the northern firefighters. And I've spoken to a few this morning, and they couldn't say enough about his service to the state of New Hampshire. So much like Perry Plummer, maybe he takes a little time off for a while and maybe come back another day, but he's really one that's going to be severely missed in state service.
Absolutely. Thank you. Any other discussion? Okay. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the resignation of Chief Parisi is accepted. From the Lakes Management Advisory Committee, could I please have a motion to accept the resignation of Mary Truell of Meredith?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Mary's resignation is accepted. From the Rivers Management Advisory Committee, could I please have a motion to accept the resignation of Norman Sims of Winchester?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Mr. Sims' resignation is accepted. From the Water Council, could I please have a motion to accept the resignation of David Jobert of Wolfboro?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? David's resignation is accepted, and that concludes resignations for today. We have a variety of confirmations I'd like to address. Let's begin by having hopefully a motion to confirm Mary Mitchell of Hooksett to the Advisory Council on Workers' Compensation.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Mary is confirmed. Could I please have a motion to confirm Charles Powell Warner to the Board of Accountancy?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Charles is confirmed. Could I please have a motion to confirm Gregory Davis of Newmarket to the Board of Home Inspectors?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Mr. Davis is confirmed. Could I please have a motion to confirm Joseph Griffin of Goffstown to the Board of Home Inspectors?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Mr. Griffin is confirmed. Could I please now have a motion to confirm Matthew Kitsis of Bow to the Board of Nursing?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Mr. Kitsis is confirmed. Could I please have a motion to confirm Tracy Johnson of Nashua to the Occupational Therapy Governing Board?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Tracy Johnson is confirmed. Could I please have a motion to confirm Donald Braven of Portsmouth to the New Hampshire Motor Vehicle Industry Board?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Donald is confirmed. Could I please have a motion to confirm Colby Chaput of Concord to the Volunteer New Hampshire Board of Directors?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Vote is confirmed. Could I please have a motion to confirm Connor Jennings of Manchester to the Volunteer New Hampshire Board of Directors?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And Connor Jennings is confirmed. Could I please have a motion to confirm Gregory Stevens of Manchester to the Volunteer New Hampshire Board of Directors?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And Greg Stevens is confirmed, and that concludes our confirmations for today. I do have some nominations to read into the record. As the Assistant Commissioner for the Department of Corrections, I nominate General Bill Conway of Concord. The Board of Licensed Dietitians, I nominate Courtney Eaton of Merrimack. For the Cannon Mountain Advisory Commission, I nominate Frank McConnell of Newport, Terry Penner of Carroll, Thaddeus Presby of Franconia. As the Education and Training Officer for the Department of Administrative Services, I nominate Stephen Mason Jr. of Gilmanton. As a Justice to the New Hampshire Circuit Court, I nominate Beth Kissinger of Hopkinton. As the Commissioner to the Public Utilities Commission, I nominate Daniel Goldner of Manchester. To the Nash Stream Forest Citizens Committee, I nominate Sally Manakinian of Shelburne. To the Oil Fund Disbursement Board, I nominate Dana Jones of Conway. To the Rivers Management Advisory Committee, I nominate Robert Racine of Stratham. To the Speech Language Pathology Governing Board, I nominate Mary Ellen McKay of Nashua. And to the Waste Management Council, I nominate Stephen Collette of Madbury. And that concludes nominations for today. And if I just may, is there a hearing? For the circuit and superior judge. Okay, so that'll happen. Okay, great. Okay, so moving on, we have our consent calendar agenda. I first ask for a motion to adopt the consent calendar agenda. Any discussion or request to remove items for further discussion as part of the consent calendar? Okay, hearing no request to remove any items, all in favor of the consent calendar agenda as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent calendar is approved. Moving right along to our regular agenda. Our first item is from the Business Finance Authority, as we discussed. So the way we're going to work this is, as we usually do, we'll ask a representative from the BFA to come up and speak. We'll allow the executive council to partake in the discussion, and at that time, following that, I will open it to a public hearing, and anyone who is either here with us in the room or is joining us over the phone, again, just press 5* to virtually raise your hand. So with that, good morning.
Good morning, Leslie.
How are you? Good to
I'm
see you.
well, thank you. It's good to see everybody in person. It's been quite a while. So,
Yeah, if you could just kick off and just maybe talk a little bit about the item. And,
absolutely. So for the record, Director James P. Walsh, New Hampshire Business Finance Authority, Jeremy Spinizzi, Senior Credit Officer, Business Finance Authority. We're here today because we're asking for approval to increase an existing line of credit to an organization known as WEDCO. This is the Wentworth Economic Development Corporation. They're a nonprofit who makes small business loans to small companies in their region, mostly in the Lakes region of New Hampshire. And we're asking to increase the line of credit from $250,000 to $350,000, so a $100,000 increase. This is a result of them having more demand for loans in their region, and also that the current line is a little oddly sized, where if they make a loan that's about $150,000, $200,000, it doesn't leave them any room to then make a second loan, so they can't do 2 projects at once, so they need to be able to do that. And also construction costs are going up, so projects are elevating in costs a little bit, so they need a little more capital to support these businesses. These lines of credit are not guaranteed by the state of New Hampshire. It's using VFA, non-taxpayer dollars. We have it in place in most regions of the state. Wedco does a great job. They've had this line of credit with us for almost a decade. They always pay on time, good impact in their region, and we're very happy to support the request as is our board, and we're welcoming any questions.
Great, thank you very much. We'll open up for, see if the council has any questions on this item. Councilor Gaston.
Thank you, Governor. As you know, I talked to you about increasing line of credit because it doesn't look like that maybe once that they bumped up to that line of credit. And I just have a problem that not that we're guaranteeing it because we're not, but when you increase lines of credit, sometimes people do things that they usually don't do.
Yeah, I think that's a fair question. They hit the max that they had drawn at about 70% or so in the last year-ish. And so you could say, well, they have more room, why do they need more? It goes back to what I said is they have more loans coming, they need the other two projects at once. But to answer, I think, your other question is, what kind of oversight does the BFA put in place to make sure these funds are being used appropriately? So as a line of credit, if this is approved, we don't just go out and write them a check and say, do what you will with it. Those funds are held by us, and they have to requisition them for approved projects that meet certain parameters, send us the analysis, all the legal paperwork on who that borrower is in their local community, and it gets all checked and verified, and then we advance the loan, and it's advanced to them. So it would not be available for Wedco to use for general purpose funds.
Councilor Kennedy.
Thank you. Good to see you. I'm sorry I didn't catch up to you because we were playing phone tag there for a while. But I did call the executive director of Denise Roy Farm about this particular request. And just for the record, Denise has been in this position for over 20 years, and she's very diligent, very thoughtful about the money that she oversees and the corporations she's been involved in for so long. So there is indeed a construction boom in the Lakes region. So much that a lot of the bidding on major projects, they can't find people to bid on projects. I use the example of the Whittier Bridge that's supposed to be in place in Allspeed.
Yeah.
They put out 2 bids and they have no takers, and that's a $6 figure project that, which we'd like to get done because that project's been out there for many years. But I guess my question is this is being backed up by collateral, this $100,000 request. So could you explain that, how that works?
Yes, Councilor. So every time one of these lines of credit is drawn down, they are using it to make a loan to a local company. So they have to do a couple things that Wedco does. They have to pledge that loan to the BFA, and we only fund 80% of that loan, so they have to have some skin in the game, right? So we have that loan that it serves as collateral, and there's certain ratios on what that has to meet. So we say, I believe it's 120% coverage. So we need full collateral coverage on any money we advance, plus an extra 20% as a buffer, just in case you don't get what you hope you would get if things went sideways. So we have the loan they assign, and then they have other loans that exist that they've made in the past with their own funds, and those get pledged to the BFA as well. So if loan A fails, they have loans B, C, and D to substitute in and pay us back with.
Right. And as I understand it, according to Wedco, is that they're the first in line when it comes to getting their money back if someone defaults on it.
Yeah.
And then, so I feel very comfortable in extending the credit based off of that.
Yeah, we have never had a loss in these line of credits in 30 years.
Thank you.
Real quick, there's no state guarantee with this, correct?
That's correct, Councilor.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing there's no other questions at this time from the Executive Council, I'll now open the public hearing portion of this item, as it is an item from the Business Finance Authority. So if there's anyone here joining us in person or on the line, please just raise your hand by pressing 5-star to speak if there's anyone from the public wishing to speak on this matter. And we'll just give that a minute. Is Fallon a minute? Oh, Courtney. Hey, Courtney. So let's give it a minute and see if anyone raises their hand over the phone. Courtney, are there any requests from the public?
Good morning. No, I don't have any hands raised.
Okay, thank you very much. And seeing no one requesting to speak here within council chambers, I will close the public hearing portion of this BFA item. Any further questions from the council? Okay, thank you very much. This is an item from the Business and Finance Authority, therefore it does require a roll call vote. So I'll turn it over to Karen Lyons.
Councilor Kenny?
Yes.
Councilor Warmington?
Yes.
Councilor Stevens?
Yes.
Councilor Gatsby?
Yes.
Councilor Wheeler?
Yes.
Thank you very much. And with that, item 6 is approved.
Thank you, Governor.
Thank you, everybody. So before we get into, the next thing we're going to get into is the items from the Department of Health and Human Services. But we do want to give the department a couple moments to speak on 2 different issues before we really take up their agenda items. This will allow, I think, the Executive Council to get up to speed in a general fashion on some of the key and pressing issues from Health and Human Services. In that way, I think it will allow for a more healthy and robust discussion as the various contracts come before us. So is the Commissioner here? Good morning, Commissioner. How are you?
Good.
Commissioner, I guess I'll turn it over to you. Where would you like to start with the presentation this morning?
So I have Chris Anello here from the Mineral Department, and Rich Labors is here from Employment Security, and they're going to do a presentation on child care, whole families, workforce, that area. So
Okay, great.
They can start.
Great, yeah, come on up.
Mental health.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Commissioner. We have lots of paper, so I apologize.
Go.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
So good morning. Thank you. First of all, I want to thank Councilor Kenny for bringing this matter in front of Governor and Council. I think childcare is something that is critically important in our state, but we don't always talk about it a lot. For me personally, it seems like childcare has really followed me throughout my career. First, working with young families in the Lakes region that were vulnerable and needed childcare really as their typical learning environment. And then as a parent, I really relied and needed childcare to do great work. And then later on when I led nonprofits, I really needed childcare to ensure that my employees were at work and focused at work, because that was super important. And I think, this past year we've done a lot with COVID. And one of the silver linings, I think, of COVID, and I try to find them wherever I can, is that people are talking about childcare. Childcare, we all know, was critically important as the state began to shut down, and childcare was there. And I should mention, Donnelly Lozo should be on the phone. Okay, thanks, Jonathan. So before we get into a little bit on childcare, I really want to share a little bit about the work of the department along actually with New Hampshire Employment Security. And this goes to our work with whole families. And in 2019, and I think Rich might have passed this out, Governor Sununu, along with the department, published a paper on helping business thrive and families prosper. And what this really looked at is the cliff effect, which I know some of you may be aware of, but it's when an individual either takes on a new job or goes for a promotion, but the increase in wages do not make up for the loss of benefits. And so as a family, they end up, if they take this job, being worse off for their family. And who wants to do that for their family, right? And so we really wanted to figure out how do we close the cliff effect, because what Rich is going to talk about is this is an untapped workforce. And so how do we tap this workforce and enable them to do all the good work that they're doing? So our work with whole families, which we really started in 2019, tied nicely with COVID and the impact of childcare. So for me and for Rich, it really all kind of came together, which is always so important in our work. And so we have been working closely, and it's not just New England, we've been working with the Administration for Children and Families, Region 1, National Governors Association, the Association of State Legislators, all around how do we solve this cliff effect. And using data, which Rich will talk a little bit about, and helping us make our decisions as to where do we need to put our efforts. So the goals of whole families is pretty simple. It's how do we support business and disrupt poverty? How do we leverage evidence-based multi-generational work? And how do we incentivize work and we boost individuals so that they can achieve? And then how do we provide efficiencies? And so you'll see here on one of the sheets in your PowerPoint, this all ties to childcare. And so we have 3 phases, which I think about loosely when it comes to the pandemic. And I think what's important to note is New Hampshire never closed childcare, ever. Other states did, I think Massachusetts did, and then they were scrambling because you needed childcare for your essential workers. And so what we did is we got together really early on with the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation, with leaders within the industry. And we really figured out what is needed now. How do we get resources to these providers so they feel safe, so they can stay open to meet the needs of families. And so we formed the Child Care Collaborative, and within a month, we got needed resources, financial, equipment, supplies, PPE, and support. And so we really wrapped around some of the work of child care. And now, as you'll see in this diagram, we're really in the stabilization phase and the recovery. And one of the things that if you talk to anybody in childcare, it was fragile pre-pandemic. It was an extremely fragile system. And so now we have this opportunity to build it back better and stronger because we all know the importance of childcare. And how do we match supply and demand, right? Because in order for New Hampshire economy to recover, there's certain job sectors, tourism, hospitality, which Rich will touch on, and we might need a different type of childcare for those environments. And so really, how do we pull all of this together while strengthening families and our community? So it's super exciting work. And we've been able, since the onset of the pandemic, we have released just about $65 million to stabilize this industry. And we've been able to leverage a variety of sources, including federal, some state dollars, as well as philanthropy, and really bring it all together and say, how do we stabilize it? And some of the things that we did is early on in the pandemic, when we knew families weren't coming, but we knew childcare needed to be there, we allowed disaster billing. So any provider who received childcare scholarship, we paid based on enrollment, not attendance, because we knew those slots needed to be there. We've also most recently paid for COVID absenteeism. So if a child care center, regardless if they are funded to us at all, but if they have to close due to an outbreak or an exposure, we will pay for the cost of that child care center so that those families don't have to pick up those pieces. And so we're really using a lot of the resources to think about how to do things differently, and then that ties at the same time to our recommendation that's come from the cliff effect to stabilize moving forward. And so before I turn it over to Rich, I just want to say that we are expecting another influx of federal dollars to come in. I still haven't. We just received $20 million in January, and we got those dollars out in 3 weeks to our providers. We were the first, I get a little competitive, so I just have to let you know that. In New England, we got the award letter, I think February 11th. By March 1st, the application was live, and people had checks in their accounts by the 26th. And that was helping us, yeah, pretty good, huh? That was helping us to keep stable. And now we're just waiting on our award letters, but we have a couple pots of money that we're going to be able to use to stabilize and then think to the future and test potentially some of the recommendations we have in the closed test. So, Rick?
All right, so Chris has given me the easy task.
Yes, quick, can we
Council.
have a quick question?
Sorry,
If you
yeah.
don't mind, just so it's a little more, can you mind?
Yeah.
Great.
Question, thank you. Thank you, Governor. The $20 million that you've already received,
Mhm.
how much is that per child?
Oh, my goodness. I don't know off the top of my head because there's a combination of children that are in licensed care, which is about 43,000. And so what we did is we gave it out, I want to say, off the top of my head, to 500 in different centers. And they applied for the dollars, and we came up with a formula to how we distributed the money. So family child care centers got a base rate, and then how we worked it for centers, it was based on the number of classrooms, because we felt capacity was super important, number of staff, because with COVID, some of them have had to change some of their staffing patterns, so that was part of the formula, as well as that's also an indication of quality, because if you have more staff. And then we also based it on the percentage of how many of children receiving New Hampshire Child Care Scholarship, because those are all vulnerable families. And so that's how we broke it out, but I could actually go back and get you that information.
If I may, I want to say it accounted for approximately 10,000 kids, 10 to 15,000?
Yeah, there's 45,000
system.
children in licensed childcare, and this only went to licensed or licensed exempt, because there are other childcare that aren't licensed or licensed exempt, and we can't, give money to that. But I can get that actual number for you, because we have it we have an updated data system, which has been remarkable, so I have it, I just don't have it off the top of my head.
But there were about 500 applicants?
507 in this round. In the first round, we had, I want to say close to 700. We've done so many.
So not to put you on the spot, but how many, and they're all different sizes, I'm just trying to do rough math. On average, how many kids per facility?
It really depends, because family child care, you have some that are licensed exempt, which may be 3 or under, then you have family child care, and then you have big centers that are multi-site, and then after-school programs. I can get all of that, but there's never an easy answer to any of that.
Question.
Please.
On nutrition and retention, we know that the average child care worker in New Hampshire makes slightly over $11 to $12 per hour. What are we doing during this COVID crisis to incentivize, to retain
So
staff?
so there's a couple things. Early on, we gave staff incentives for those centers, and that was passed on directly to their workers. In this, I have not received our official award letter, so I want to be careful. But in the second round of funding, there is some provisions where you have like kind of a drop list as to what you need to do to spend the money, and one of them is around personnel. Now, I don't want to go in there and say, give everybody a raise, right? But how do we sustain that moving forward? Because child care is a mix of government, families, and community, right? We can't, it's a partnership, and so we have to figure out how do we build these partnerships, because I only have control over a small piece of it, and that's child care scholarship. We hate to do something that impacts families, right? So one of the things we're looking at is with one of the pots of money is to, when we distribute it to centers, say, okay, you must give X amount of this directly to your employees in the form of bonuses or whatever, so at least we can begin to work on it. But that's a huge issue, is the cost of the pay, right? And so how do you, and then that impacts with training dollars too, because how you have to incentivize people to want to go into this field, and that ties to some of our work with the club.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Rich.
And I'll be back at the very end, so you can ask me. I'm not leaving.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I apologize. Sorry.
No worries. Thank you for this presentation. the monies that you're receiving from the federal government have really been used to shore up the whole industry during a time that it's been struggling. And now you're about to receive a huge infusion, actually the biggest investment in child care since World War II out of the American Rescue Plan. And do you feel that that is going to be a help to our child care centers to be able to shore up this whole sector?
So, yes, at the same time, we can't continue as we have been, right? And so we have to think about what does childcare need to look like in the future, and business models that weren't successful early on, they're not going to be successful as we move on. So Rich and I talk a lot about how do we partner business, right? Because businesses during the pandemic were like, I never thought about childcare. I need childcare. Childcare centers have said, you know, I partner with a business and then my costs go down and costs go down for families. So how do we think about this differently? How do we incentivize night and weekend care, you know, that meets the needs of children. I don't want little kids sleeping in big centers overnight, but how do we work with family childcare? So we need to think about it differently, but we have the ability to now, because now we have some really good data. We have, everybody's talking about child care. There's lots of groups. We have the Council for Thriving Children. And, you know, the council looks broad across all early childhood, but childcare's always been on their agenda. So we have a lot of people thinking about it. We have the preschool development grant. You know, how do we partner? I think I saw Commissioner Edelman somewhere. We're partnering with the Department of Education all the time. How do we partner some of their initiatives with childcare and early learning? So we need to think differently and also think about what do families want. Because some families aren't going back to their 9-to-5 job, and yet they still need childcare. But it needs to look different. So I think we have an opportunity to be creative, think outside the box. I meet every other week with the other New England states with their like cabinet level people in childcare, and we're brainstorming all of the time. What do you do? Hey, can I do this? Can we partner here? You know, because we have a lot of migration between the states and a lot of similarities, and so we're working really collaboratively to think differently. And we have some dollars that we can use to test and try to do things differently, always with the goal of, okay, what are we going to do when these dollars dry up? Because we don't want to set up a system that we can't continue.
Councilor, you want
Thank you. One more question.
Yeah.
Does the department hold on to any funds for administration fees?
So it depends on the funding source.
The fund for $20 million that you received.
So that $20 million, we did not keep any for ourselves. We kept a little bit on the audit set aside, but in those dollars, it was all going out. We committed to having at least 75% go out to the field. The New England states, we actually made a pact as to what we would put out, and it was decided that 65% was the bottom threshold, and we did 75% in direct grants. And we only, in that we did one contract to kind of help us with some of the training, and that was a small amount of money.
So the department didn't keep any?
We kept our audit set aside, and that is it. And
Which was that?
Off the top of my head, I'm going to say it was probably $19,000, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's not much of a set aside, but.
No, I'm hoping I was the right answer. I know it wasn't a lot. Like, really? Okay. Exactly. No, but we really, and we did it, you know, using technology. We got it out quickly.
Okay, Rich.
Sorry.
How are you?
All right, good, Governor, how are you?
Good. The wizard of employment. George Holman.
Yeah, don't let them So Chris asked me to summarize about 200 pages here in 5 minutes. So, no, I'm not going to attempt to do that, but what I did for counselors in the copies that I printed out this morning, I did give you a little bit of a cheat sheet guide. So on that quick report, I tabbed the executive summary, and then I also tabbed the recommendations section. So you can bookend by looking over those. I know how much you're provided and how much material you have to read, so I appreciate your time and taking to review that. So I wanted to go over a little bit of background a little bit about this vendor, their methodology in looking at benefit cliff issues, and then also some of their recommendations. So Chris and I got started working on this by walking streets in Councilor Gatsas' district. Back in 2019, we were going to Medicaid expansion households and trying to entice these households to participate in workforce pathway programs, explaining to them money we had for training, money we had for transportation barriers, and go to household to household knocking on doors. So that's how we got started with this. So we realized early on the assortment of benefit cliff issues that can present as a disruption to normal, logical labor force behavior. So normal, logical behavior, you're offered a job or you're offered a promotion, you take it. Right? And on the micro level, that's good for your family. And on the macro level, for state economic policy and our labor force, that's good for everybody. Benefit cliffs disrupt that logical flow, that logical decision making, so that rather than taking that job, taking that promotion, you either know through conversations that you've had and looking at the benefit programs that you currently receive, either direct assistance or subsidized assistance and services through either child care, Medicaid expansion, or housing subsidy, you know that it's going to impact your immediate future benefits. Or you talk to somebody that's had a negative impact. That right there is a benefit cliff. So at that point in time, that decision for that person not to participate or not to more fully participate in our labor force is a drain on our ability to organically grow our labor force here in the state. So employment security in partnership with HHS, we approach this both because altruistically it's the right thing to do, right? On the micro level, we want the family to be better off to take that job. But also we know that from a selfish perspective, selfish in the perspective of our state's economy and our ability to, again, organically grow our labor force to meet business need, we need for that person to take that job, to expand their employment. So there's altruistic reasons and selfish reasons why we all need to be concerned with these benefit cliff issues. So that's a little bit of the background on the issue. In December of 19, we had a contract that came before the council that was approved that awarded a contract to do the economic analysis of benefit cliff issues in our communities and across the state. That was awarded by the council to a firm out of Philadelphia, a lot of experience with doing economic analysis, both at the local level, state level across the country. That was eConsult Solutions. They teamed up with an organization, a public policy center out of, that's housed right now at Columbia University's Bank Street Graduate School of Education, the National Center for Children in Poverty. So they teamed up to look at these benefit cliff issues in the state. And how they did that was through both the data that they had from unemployment at the time, which at the time they originally started, we didn't have much for them, right? Government, we were at 2.6% unemployment. But we have...
2.4, but... to say it now, February 2020. They big up one.
So we had rich data source from HHS with New Heights data. So we originally started looking at that, taking out all the person identifiable information, and really start to look at those households and applying $1,000 in additional earnings in $1,000 increments to see when did they hit cliffs and what were those cliffs and how did they rebound from those cliffs. So in the material that you have, in one of the handouts, you can see, and what I've tried to pull out from that very long report, is that when you go in and you look at benefit cliff issues layered over the information that we have from New Heights, and then we're able to get a much more well-developed and richer data set from unemployment as our numbers went up and we knew the specific reasons why people were collecting unemployment, we were able to provide that data set to this consultant, and then they were able to look at by program, what benefit cliffs were hitting what households, and how did it impact them short-term and long-term. So we looked at Medicaid and Medicaid expansion, we looked at SNAP, we looked at TANF, we looked at housing subsidies, we looked at child care subsidies, and we did look at lobbying as well with fuel assistance. So we looked at all of that. We were able to map out exactly what households were hitting cliffs. And then with some examples of certain types of households, they were able to map that out. So we can see visually, okay, you're telling me there's a benefit cliff, or there's a series of benefit cliffs. What does it do? When does it hit them for household earnings? And you start to see that family that I talked about before that had either the perception or they knew there was an actual cliff that was going to prevent them from taking that promotion or job, why they're doing that. And you see the cliffs that hit early and often and that continue to hit, that despite earnings going up for that family that chose the promotion, you see their net resources staying flat over an extended period of time. So it begs the question at that point, why would that family take on that additional responsibility with either a promotion or a new job when it puts the benefits that they've grown to depend on for their family, it puts those benefits in jeopardy. So with all of that, we went and we developed some recommendations which we've highlighted in the report that we've provided. Most of those recommendations center around child care and ways that we can expand both, but not just expand it in a blanket fashion, but smartly and intelligently expanding it to look at what, like Chris was talking about, enticing more employers to provide child care at the place of employment, looking at those second and third shift workers and trying to provide some opportunities and some availability for them as well. So a lot of recommendations in the child care space, other recommendations in our other program areas as well. So a lot of great work that went into this. I can say it's probably the only report of its kind that's been released in the country at this point. Because of when we started pre-pandemic. When we got hit with the pandemic, rather than asking the vendor to button everything up, shut it down, and just issue the report, we actually expanded scope. We asked them to do more because we wanted to make sure that we had a report that was relevant post-pandemic as well.
And Rich, I think what also makes ours different is we did statewide, countywide, and then we drilled down into 40 different communities across the state because we know how our communities are different yet alike, and we really wanted to get that information.
And we have a link that we'll provide to all of you that goes over a profile page for every single community in the state, looking at not only how these cliffs impact households in that community, but also gauging that community against other likely situated communities, not just by population, but looking at other community issues that are going on there, how they compare with other similar communities across the state. So we'll get you that link. You can go in for every single community in your district and compare those and see how that looks. And with all that being said, before turning it over to Donnelly Lozo, who's going to finish up our presentation here, if there are any questions from any council that can take those now.
Councilor Kenny.
Thank you, Rich, for that presentation. One of the things I keep hearing about with the cliff effect is that because the federal government is providing an incentive for people to stay on unemployment, that in reality they're being taken, out of the workforce. And so I hear it more and more is stop the benefit, get people back to work, particularly in staffing and child care. And so, while your report, is this a completed report or is it an ongoing report?
This is a completed report,
Okay.
but issues that are identified that now we can continue to analyze as we go forward, because they look at a lot of those issues that grew up during the pandemic.
So when they stop that benefit in September of this year, it would be very interesting to see what happens from September until the end of the year as far as people going back to work. Because part of the cliff effect, I think, is because of the unemployment benefit that's being offered by the federal government, which is impacting our state and our staffing when it comes to child care. Does that sound right?
You nailed it.
Okay.
And we're doing a lot of work to prepare families and working with our community partners. And I know Henry and I, around the Medicaid space and, the SNAP space, there's a lot of additional benefits families are getting. So we're trying to figure out what are the pathways so when those benefits go away, we can get people working into the right fields and partnering with childcare. And some of the dollars we're looking at is capacity building. So what does somebody, need to do for more training to do more incentives to get people in the door? So be ready when all of that happens.
So I'm going to use one last example, which is Manchester. And the only reason I have to use Manchester because Mimi O'Connor was on a conference call the other day. And I know that's Senator Gatzis' district, but it seems relevant, the information, is that they have the capacity for many more kids, 30 or 40. They have a 70 wait list, but and they provide child care for Elliott Hospital. But the issue really is staffing. In order to take on that capacity of 30, 40 more kids, they're trying to get staffing. So you got a waiting list, you got staffing issues, and you have the need that is out there. So this federal unemployment benefit, although I don't think it's 100% of the problem, it is a part of the problem. So I don't know what you say to those families, but we need to get people back to work.
And it is the federal, and then it's also the typical cliff effects, right? Because we have a TANF work program, and so we have to make sure we get people into jobs, or else they're going to lose their benefits. And so we're actually partnering some of these work programs with certain child care centers as the way to get people working. So, yeah.
And just the last comment, though, child care centers are considered essential. So you made a good point in that they didn't shut down. And so the staffing shut down, but the child care centers didn't shut down. So I just think that's amazing that New Hampshire somehow was able to keep these centers going, on whatever staffing they had.
Right.
So let's, is Darlene joining us?
I think so. Donnelly, are you there?
Well, good morning, Governor, members of the Executive Council. How are you this morning?
Good morning.
That's a rhetorical question. I'm very pleased to be able to participate this morning. I currently serve as the Executive Director for Southern New Hampshire Services, which is the Community Action Partnership serving Hillsborough and Rockingham counties. We are one of the largest child care providers in the state. We're also a large employer. I was speaking about the exchange that was just happening. And staffing is certainly an issue, but staffing isn't just about the unemployment benefits. It's also about people that have school-age children and the, school's not back in session. So, but that has been one of the things that has also brought child care to the forefront of a lot of this discussion. We're fortunate that so much of this work was well underway pre-COVID, and while the pandemic has certainly been devastating in so many ways, it did provide, as you've heard, a very unusual opportunity to test some of the theories that we have been working on pre-pandemic. We were able to test these theories because of the waivers for so many programs provided on both the federal and the state level. In so many instances, we were collectively able to demonstrate our work could be done differently. It provided the flexibility to see more clearly the barriers and the connections of the pieces of the puzzle that make up our family support system. It also showed where the gaps are. The New Hampshire Whole Family Approach to Job Chapter work is across New Hampshire, but it's also regionally and on the federal level. As Chris mentioned, our federal partners are at the table and are one of the leaders of this effort. The Whole Family Chapter subcommittees that were created pre-pandemic align with the majority of the subject matter of the policy recommendations in the economic report that you've heard about this morning. Our House Bill 4 Benefit Cliff Effect Working Group will be active participants with the Whole Family subcommittees and with the Department of Health and Human Services integration team to take a deeper dive into the recommendations that you've heard about this morning, the lion's share of which are child care related. Our calculator that has been in development and should be ready by the end of May, also was in alignment with the whole family work. The House Bill 4 group and the legislative requirement for reporting recommendations in June. The calculator will be a significant asset to the people receiving benefits, the staff for many agencies that are trying to help create the path to economic stability and mobility so that scenarios can be built to help people understand that there is a path to achieving their goals and that roadblocks that have been impossible to overcome can be changed. And the employers that try to promote their staff onto a career ladder will see why too often their employee cannot take advantage of a growth and income opportunity. And lastly, this calculator will help our policymakers see more clearly the levers that can be moved that can positively influence the path for our New Hampshire families that face far too many challenges, that lead them to believe that when we talk about opportunity, they don't believe it means them. In April of 2019, the white paper, which you received today, which led to the creation of the Cliff Effect Working Group, stated, and I'll quote, "By re-engineering our public system of benefits to put individuals and their families first, while strengthening resources and local access to supports, we give them the chance to thrive and to make choices that help them succeed at work and at home, all while addressing and supporting the employer need for an expanded labor pool. When children see their parents advance in a career, it forecasts their future expectations of themselves and their own families. Parents, in order to work successfully, need to know their children are safe and are in nurturing environments. Families need connection to the vital community supports to be able to enter and succeed in the workplace. Providing quality early childhood education today will help ensure that the next generation of workers are better prepared to meet the demands of tomorrow's workplace. The state and businesses need workers contributing their talents to build a stronger and more prosperous New Hampshire." End quote from the report. You know, I often tell people that you just have to, as Chris described this morning when she introduced herself, if we can remind people to look through the glasses that they've worn over the years or the hats that they have worn to understand you were a parent once, what was the thing foremost in your mind, right? You were an employee, what did you have to worry about to go to work? You know, I'm a new grandmother. Granddaughter number 4 arrived on April Fool's Day, and her mom's a teacher, and my son's an electrician. Well, you know, the affordability of child care for them to go back to work soon is a challenge. So all of this work, all of this synergy, all this excitement around what's possible is an opportunity for this work and for those that have been cheerleaders for changes that can make all the difference to our parents working, children thriving, and businesses succeeding. It's a great time to be able to do some of this work, and we're grateful that you're interested in the work that we're doing and that you wanted to hear more. So thank you so much.
Well, that's great. Thank you. Councilor Kenny?
Donna Lee, thank you for all you do down in southern New Hampshire. Please don't forget northern New Hampshire. Just have to put that plug in there. One of the things that I've noticed with child care centers is that there's many of them, and they're spread all over the state. And but I feel as though, particularly like in the real estate market, we have a better understanding of data when the realtor says we only have 1.8% of apartment availability in the state. And I wonder when it comes to child care centers, there's no really central group that is, you know, an association or collecting the data to understand each child care center, how much of that child care center, you know, how much is available for child care, what is the staffing, what is the size, what is the delivery of service. Are you working on anything like that to collect all this data so that it will better help the policymakers and the budgeteers in the future?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, in partnership with the state, we have been operating what's called New Hampshire Child Care Aware, which is really both a training center to help with education of child care professionals to make sure that we're delivering a quality level of childcare services. And it's also a collector of data and information, a resource for childcare centers. We're also operating the TEACH program, which is a scholarship program to get people into the field. So there are a lot of data coming in. The work that UNH is doing, the work that Chris's team is doing, is all making a difference to line up all this information so good decisions can be made. And there's room for all kinds of child care because everybody, sometimes you make decisions based on your children's age, of whether you want them in a center or a family-based care, and how we can support those centers not to lose any ground. I mean, we typically, when we're at full capacity, we're serving over 600 children, and we have waiting lists. Currently, we're serving just over half of our full capacity for many different reasons. Staffing reasons, parents that don't need child care for their younger kids because their older kids are home from school. There's a lot of dynamics at play. But yes, there's a fair amount of information. Understanding what to do with it's going to be a lot of work, but I think we're getting our arms around it.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Councilor Warmington?
Yeah, I just want to say it's really exciting to see this creative approach that you're taking and know that you now have some resources to assist with that. I think it's critically important that we address overall the cost of child care. I know in my own family I'm also a grandmother and then my daughter is weighing, whether it makes sense to even go back to school because the cost of child care is so high. It's really critical. It's essential work. I think that we should all be grateful to Senator Shaheen, Senator Hassan, Congressman Pappas, and Congresswoman Custer for the support of the American Rescue Act. It is going to bring unprecedented amounts of money into the state and investments in child care, and in particular child care tax credits for parents. It's going to be a huge relief, no matter where they're sending their child, private centers or otherwise. I will just say about the unemployment benefits that the federal unemployment benefit lifted so many people in our state out of poverty, paid for their rent, and put food on the table during this crisis. So we have to understand that was such a huge benefit to us. I just want to say how much I appreciate all the information you provided today, the creative approach that you are taking, and it will be for the better of our children and for our state. And I want to thank you all. Thank you, Councilor, for raising this issue.
Could I just add, I think that's, you're very welcome, and as you can tell, we're all very excited about it. And I do appreciate the work that our federal delegation has done. I also appreciate the fact that our governor has taken a lead role in this whole family approach to jobs. When we meet with the 6 states in our region and he leads the charge, it's very lifting to the people in our state to see all hands on deck. State level, federal level, local level, everybody pulling in the same direction to make this work. As an agency that serves people with the challenge of low income, whether we're doing jobs or child care or adult education, it's really, as you said, it's an exciting time, and working together the New Hampshire way is making a difference.
Councilor?
Thank you for all that you're doing. We know that during the pandemic and school closures, there's been a precipitous drop in reporting of child abuse. Rockingham County Child Advocacy Center saw a horrific decline in Derry alone, and 97% reduction. My question is, by keeping our child care, our preschools open, have you been monitoring the reporting of child abuse?
So I don't have that data handy. I could refer to Joe Grissom in our department. He tracks all that. We work very closely, Joe and I, around supports to families. And one of the pieces we are going to be looking at with some of the new dollars coming in, I was actually just talking with Erica about it, is increasing mental health support and consultation to child care centers through our community mental health centers. So we're looking at a number of those ways, and also through our family resource centers, which work very closely with our child care centers.
Thank you.
Great. I think we are.
I know you have another presentation.
Can't thank you guys enough.
Thank you.
Really,
Thank you.
your energy is infectious, which is a very, very good thing. And anyone who's just listened to this presentation knows we have 2 incredible individuals leading the charge on this, and we're very fortunate. It's all about a great team, and you guys have just done a phenomenal job. not just looking at the issue, but looking at it differently, clearly very, very differently. And to both of these individuals' credit, when the crisis really hit in March of last year, and we made the decision to push harder, not pull back, and really get this stuff going. Other states are just getting back, just figuring out where we were a year ago, right? And we're just so far ahead of the game. So dollars coming in is great, but really challenging ourselves to be, I think, as you said, Chris, innovative. You got to think to the future models. The old way of doing it isn't going to get it done. It's not a failed system by any means, but it's just not going to get it done. And so it takes folks on the ground to actually make it happen. So Ken, cannot thank you guys. Counselor?
I have a question for them.
Sure.
A question for you.
Oh, that's tomorrow at 3 o'clock.
The question I'm raising is, the unaccompanied children that are on our southern border, do we know of any of those children that come to New Hampshire?
They have not. No, we've engaged in conversations with federal health and human services about, they've asked us about what our capacity and facilities and ability to assist with that might be. We're kind of assessing whether we really meet the needs of what they need in terms of bilingual and all of these sorts of things. So, but no, none of those unaccompanied, undocumented children have come across the border in this surge. I think there's 20,000 children now on the southern border that have come across the country.
So
It's just an unbelievable crisis. It's out of control. So of course when they called, we picked up the phone. We're happy to assist if we can, but I don't know if we're going to meet their needs. But we're working with them now to see. But no, as of right now, we don't know of any that have been in New Hampshire.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Look, I just wanted to put a PSA here. The child care center list that you all have from your respective district has been pre-approved. So if you want to see what a child care center looks like, how it operates, talk to the leadership and the staff of that organization. It's early in New Hampshire that has put it together. So if you have the opportunity and you want to visit a child care center, it's there for you to do so. Sometimes in the past it's been tough to get into child care center because it's locked up and you're a stranger, but you have an open invitation.
That's great. Well, thank you, Councilor Kenny, for bringing this, for kind of allowing this to all happen. It's a whole wealth of information. Appreciate you doing that. Commissioner, we're back for more.
We're back
This
for
is
more.
great.
So requested a presentation on the mental health system, and the governor had just spoken about the innovation and how we need to do things differently to be successful in childcare. That is the same for mental health. Fixing the system requires a reset of our mind, our perspective. Success can't be defined as having enough beds to take care of the people in the ER. That's not success. Success is preventing them from ever getting to the ER at the beginning. And that is a shift for our state, and you will see with the investments we've made for the past 2 years and the plans that we have in the next couple of years, a lot of them are community-based. That's where it needs to be. We need to prevent our citizens from going into mental health crisis to begin with, before they ever get to the emergency room. That is the goal. So I'm going to hand the presentation over to the experts, Heather Roquin from New Hampshire Hospital, Joe Kariski from New Hampshire Hospital, Dr. Fox from Division of Behavioral Health, and Erica Umbrelli, who's the Director of Children's Behavioral Health, and they will do the presentation and answer your questions.
Great. Thank you very much.
I have more paper for you. Less paper, not more. So thank you so much for having us here, Governor Councilor, to provide you with this update on really inpatient behavioral health and inpatient psychiatric boarding. So I'm Heather Roquin. I'm the CEO at New Hampshire Hospital in Glencliff in our PATH program, and you also have Katja Fox here. So I'll start the presentation and then I'll hand it over to Katja. So we can jump right into the slides, if that's okay. So you have an agenda that's listed on slide 2 of what we're going to review today, which is really
adult boarding, ED boarding, children ED boarding, a little bit of history of the mental health system in New Hampshire, and then a summary of our efforts at Innovation. Turning to the slide on inpatient psychiatric referrals, adults. This slide shows some trending since 2017. And the real takeaway here from the data is that referrals from adults have been pretty consistent throughout the years since 2017, including through 2020 during the pandemic. This data does include referrals of folks that did not necessarily come to New Hampshire Hospital, but may have gone to a direct receiving facility at hospitals. The next slide talks a little bit about the wait list. And you can see from this data also that although referrals have been flat, the wait list has gone up during the pandemic. The most recent increase in March can be attributed to the conversion of the 10 adult beds to pediatric beds to help with that boarding crisis. So that's what you see starting in February of this year. But you can see some upward trends really during the pandemic, again, not due to referrals, but I'll get a little bit more into that in the next couple of slides, but due to really just effects of COVID and workforce and outbreaks. Today, and so you can see the last data point lists 45 adults waiting in ED. Today the number is 42. That's the current number. Next slide reviews census. And so, although demand has been steady through the pandemic, capacity is not, and this is where we have seen some adjustments in wait lists. So the graph shows the impact of COVID-19, and that is directly related to quarantining units at New Hampshire Hospital. It's not shown on the slide, but we do know from hearing anecdotally from DRFs in the hospitals, they experience the same thing with workforce and with outbreaks on their units. The next slide talks about this backdoor issue, which is our discharge barriers. So the slide below lists all the patients currently awaiting discharge at New Hampshire Hospital. So these are patients that are no longer certified as acute. And it lists the various barriers to discharge, or location that these patients need to discharge to. During the pandemic, this has been an increased barrier, especially in the nursing home area, just due to regulations that they've had regarding COVID-19, testing, admission policies, and their outbreaks as well. But there have been impacts throughout related to COVID and infection control. Next slide lists capacity throughout our system. So you have New Hampshire Hospital with a total of 175, Hampstead Hospital with a total of 60 beds, 45 of which are child beds, the DRX with 60, and then hospital-based voluntary beds at 163. So that's total capacity for inpatient. So in summary, as far as adults go, again, demand has been steady. Capacity has been variable due to COVID-19. New Hampshire Hospital is running at the highest census ever since deinstitutionalization of our campus at 175. And we do continue to struggle with discharging patients to the community. So switching gears a little bit, I'll talk about kids. So the child wait list, you can see on the graph, that's the number of children waiting, that's the wait list. And the wait list has significantly grown during the pandemic. So where adults were very flat with referrals, children's referrals have really been at unprecedented rates. Turning to the next slide. Again, number of referrals. So the first slide was children waiting. This is actual number of referrals, so you can see that increase that coincides with the pandemic. Today's, let's see, so that's referrals. I should add that in the previous slide, the wait list is indicated. You can see that
there's a gap in data, and then the trends go up as high as 49 back in February. That's about
What slide are you on? I
I'm sorry.
apologize, there's no numbers here.
Sorry,
I just lost my place.
the title is inpatient
Oh,
children
back
wait
to
list.
the children referrals? or the
Yeah,
children wait list?
wait list, yep.
Okay.
So you can see that peak at 49.
Yep.
Today's number, though, is 5. So some good news for today. Sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit. The next slide is, again, child referrals that have been trending up. And then the summary for children's wait list is that the pandemic has significantly affected the mental health of children, resulting in an increase in demand. Hampstead Hospital is fulfilling their commitment of its contract, but the demand really is unprecedented. And because of that, in February, New Hampshire Hospital did temporarily repurpose 10 adult beds to create a child unit to help assist in the wait list.
Can I just go back, did you say today's number was 5?
Five.
5? That's great.
It was great, great news.
Do we know what, I mean, I know the numbers dropped precipitously in January, I remember, and then they went back up. Do we know what is that attributed to just?
I think Katja has you have some theories on that, Katja?
So Erica Ungarelli, who's the director of our Bureau of Children's Behavioral Health, and I just spoke about that because she texted me this morning and said, hey, the number's down. Of course, for those 5 children and those families, that's still a significant issue and one that we want to get rid of. However, we don't know exactly. We think a whole bunch of things are going on to result in that reduction, including schools reopening, people paying more attention, and redoubled efforts. Those are what I would say are top.
Workforce coming back on, I imagine that has to help. Do we know, like, is Hampstead and other places getting workforce back in? Are we able to get more of these kids placed?
I can't speak to placement. Maybe Katja can remark on that. Hampstead's workforce has been steady. They're waiting for one provider to return from leave of absence. She'll be back the first week in May. So that'll open up another 7-ish beds at Hampstead Hospital. But I don't think it's related to workforce. I think, again, to back up what Katja was saying, I think schools have been huge. It's been a huge impact on children in isolation. So as kids are getting back and getting connected with peers in their school system, it's been a big help. Certainly attention. We've been working so closely with Hampstead, at New Hampshire Hospital every day, reviewing wait lists, making sure we're, getting kids moving and discharging. And it has helped that we have been able to get some kids that have been waiting for placement discharged from Hampstead Hospital. That just really got things moving with beds and turnover there.
And we've had a lot of community-based services that have increased. So we've been able to increase our capacity for wraparound services, for example, and some other community-based services, and it's something that we're still working on.
So my last slide before I hand it over to Katja is just around historical context and sort of this how did we get here question. There have been decreases in capacity over the years. So closing the Children's Hospital back in 2010, 2011 resulted in repurposing 48 adult beds to 24 child beds. So it was a net loss of adult beds when that happened. Reductions in DRF beds, reductions in some community-based residential services like group homes. That has decreased over the years. Demand for adults has been consistent, but again, pandemic-related referral increases for children have really been remarkable during this time. So, at the beginning of the pandemic, we really thought we were going to see that with adults as well, and for whatever reason, we haven't. But children have been really remarkably affected. Katja?
Yeah, so I just, on this historical context as well, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that we've had the capacity decrease over the years, and it really traces back to 2008 when we had the Great Recession. And so there were decisions that had to be made to balance our state budget, and they were incremental cuts. And so we are very fortunate that through the last couple of years, we were able to infuse the dollars. But what had happened was all those incremental cuts resulted in these closures of these beds in the community-based services. So it's going to take us a little while to build it back up. And in some cases, we are preparing for this. And Erica said, yeah, we can talk about building it back up. You're talking about the adult system. We're building a children's system because it really, it was very, there just wasn't much there. You know, we're actually building the children's system. So we are working as hard and fast as we can, but we have to understand the context in order to understand where we're at and how it's going to take a little bit more time to be able to have that robust community response. So we can go through what we're doing, and I think we've already talked a little bit about it. So there's the Hampstead contract that we referred to, and the idea of that was to have the children move to the Hampstead facility and then be able to repurpose the beds at New Hampshire Hospital for adults and expand our capacity there. And so part of that effort also included, one of the things that we found is that when we went to look at building the capacity for transitional housing, that our Medicaid rates were not favorable and our providers were not willing to stand up services. We're working on that. Henry Lippman is here if you have any specific questions about the efforts that we're taking there. So what we found was that Commissioner Schiffernet said, well, then we'll do it. You know, we're going to have to do it if no one else can. And so that's where the Philbrook Center came to be. And then just quickly going down, so one of the things that Heather said was that she was clear. This situation with the 10 beds that were open at New Hampshire Hospital for children is temporary. And so that is still our plan. We're still going to go forward with it, but we just knew that we couldn't continue to see the numbers climb and not do anything. So I'm going to skip through.
I'm sorry, I just had one other
Oh,
thing.
sure.
Sorry, going back to what is DHS doing about it. Opening PAC was huge, September 2020. Another thing we're working on to sort of really combat the issue that we have with our elder patients waiting for nursing home placement is we've been collaborating with Genesis Oceanside over Hampton to really just help them and support them. They wanted to open up a specialty unit, so we've been working directly with the center, with their corporate leadership, our physicians. We're really supporting them and kind of holding them up and developing the specialty, helping them with training, making connections with them and Seacoast Mental Health. So we think that's going to be a great thing for us to have, again, available to discharge patients who want to go to that area. So that could open up, 10, 15 beds at New Hampshire Hospital for elders that are waiting to go to a nursing home. In process, again, we're still working on the renovation of the former children's unit so we can convert those to adult beds and increase census even more. In process also, working on our recruitment and retention rates. We've talked a lot about workforce, earlier today and talking about childcare. We have the same issues or struggles with workforce, so we're trying to come up with some innovative solutions around that, and really holding on to the staff that we have has been critical. And then, again, pending, after our renovation is complete, we're going to increase our census again and get up from 175 to 184. That's the plan at New Hampshire Hospital.
So for the next slide about what are we doing about it, we should say that really what our guide is the 10-year plan. So the 10-year mental health plan and our system of care. So they work together, and that's really what everything is centered on. And that has not changed, and we're not wavering on that. We find that it's even better to have those tools in place and have those strategies in place as we face what we expect to continue to be the pandemic effect on issues of mental health. So we're doing all of that work and all of the funding and all of the different models and programs are in the process of being stood up. So I'm going a little off script just to give you a heads up that you've seen a smattering of contracts come through. You're going to start seeing many more come through in the neighborhood of 15 to 20 contracts over the next couple of months.
I hope not sole source.
Me too. We need bidders, though. We need more people. We need groups to bid on this stuff.
So we have ones that are huge procurements that are in process right now that you'll be happy to see went through that process. And then, again, if you have specific questions, rather just looking at the time and knowing that we've spent a lot of time here with you this morning, I think what we would like to do is open it up for questions at this point.
Thank you, Governor. What is the wait time now for adults in a hospital to get a vet?
Joe Christie, our CFO, and
Good morning.
The big guy.
I'm trying to remember the report that I ran last Friday. I believe the median is between 5 and 7 days.
I was going to say 5.
Yeah. I can certainly send that information to you, but I'm fairly confident it was 5 to 7 days.
In all hospitals?
Correct. So that would be any patient referred to New Hampshire Hospital, whether or not they came.
Commissioner, hi.
Good morning. I have Joe's number. So 5 days for adults is the average and 3 days for children.
I'm not so concerned with the children, but the adults. I don't know if we all remember, but the tragedy that happened at the LA hospital. It's somebody that was waiting for a bed for an awful long time.
So the goal is to defer their admissions by using some of the community resources like mobile crisis apartments. We have a behavioral health treatment center in Concord, which is similar to an urgent care. All of these programs need to be used for the community mental health center. Instead of sending a patient to the emergency room, they're bringing them into the pool and taking them into a crisis department. And we hope to expand those over the next several years so that there's more options like that.
Thank you.
Kelsey?
Thank you so much for all you're doing. We knew right out of the gate, coming from the Board of Mental Health Practices, that there was going to be an increased demand for access to behavioral mental health. My question is, a lot of our private hospitals here in New Hampshire, such as Portsmouth Regional, they closed their pavilion for adolescent beds years and years ago. This has not been addressed, I guess, in the last 10-year plan. My question is, what are private hospitals doing? Are they stepping up to help us with this issue? I have an SAU, and thanks to the governor, he's put some pressure to say, you stick to April 19. Our kids are suffering. This is an SAU. I have between 2 to 4 attempted suicides. Our kids have to go back, and I applaud the commissioner for what she's doing for getting additional beds. But we know 9 months out, this is not going to go away. And we know that providers are sending kids to Children's in Boston because they know they'll get admitted there, and chances are they'll get up to McLean's, et cetera. So we're moving incrementally in the public sector. How do we catalyze the private sector to step up and help us out right now?
It's a great question.
So I'm going to go back to the mindset change that we need to have, right? It's not about beds, it's about preventing the crisis. So I'm going to let Katja talk a little bit about the crisis network for children that we are putting together now. And I think is out for procurement or is going out for procurement.
Yeah. So the commissioner mentioned Children's Mobile Crisis. We are having an integrated mobile crisis approach as called for in the 10-year plan statewide. And so the whole idea is to avoid hitting the hospital. The idea is to provide, it's an emergency still. It's an emergency for that child, it's an emergency for that adult, it's an emergency for family and for the community. However, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to run into an emergency room. It means that you need a response to that person and that individual, that family in the community, and whether it's at the community center or if it's at their home, wherever it is, and 24/7. And so the whole point is to intervene before you hit a private hospital or any hospital. And we are looking at other, so there's the whole, we can send to you the system of care information as well as the 10-year plan. But each of those components are building the system to be able to do that intervention early and also doing prevention work. So we're working on it.
I would also add, as we reach out to additional national private providers of these services, that would potentially come into the state, we're always introducing them to to find those private partnerships. And again, those have to be partnerships on the private side that are made there. And we have had some interest, which is good, not just on the seacoast, but all across the state. And because that's the other thing, we've got to make sure that whatever services we provide hopefully are more community-based, meaning it isn't just centralized to Manchester or Portsmouth or wherever it might be, but it really is addressing a lot of the needs in the rural areas. If you're up in Landaff and your child is going through, experiencing an emergency, again, they want to be able to have services accessible there instead of having to drive 200 miles. So it's kind of finding that balance between bringing in these partnerships with private providers and also providing kind of decentralized opportunities to mobile crisis teams or whatever it might be to make sure that we can be on the spot in that moment of crisis.
Part of our projects for the next year through our Alvarez and Marcel project is CTI, which is critical time intervention, which is a program to prevent readmission back to a hospital when someone's released, and then also it's to do an IMD waiver, which is what is going to facilitate us finding private partners in other hospitals to open behavioral health wings. So once we get that, what that does is it enables hospitals to build Medicaid for adult services. We'll be able to attract partners in the private sector into New Hampshire to build more behavioral health beds, which we can't do right now because they don't get paid for the Medicaid population.
Those are huge changes that we're making.
Thank you.
Yes, that's great. Councilor.
So we've talked many times about this continuum of care that we're just missing. In New Hampshire, we're just missing some of the steps, right? And that's why people end up in the hospital, because they don't have an advanced intensive outpatient program that they can go to, because they don't have a partial hospitalization program. And you just referred to the back door as well. That is, we need these programs in order to discharge patients into transitional housing. And I'm out there talking to people who all say to me, there's a number of problems here, but number one problem is the funding, right? That if you put out an RFP, which you have, for mobile crisis units and nobody responds to them, they simply can't make it work financially.
Right. I think there is a differing of opinion on the financials between the department and the CMHC. And I think that it's going to involve more partnership for sure, to sit down at the table and really state our expectations. But that has been an ongoing issue with us putting out procurements for these services, and then either the bidding entity not able to stand up the services timely because of workforce or finances, or just no one bidding on them at all.
But it's a real commitment to come to the table and really look at the numbers, because I've been in the mental health world for a long time. These services cost a lot of money to provide. If there's a difference of opinion, is there a real commitment to sit down at the table and make this work? It has to work. I mean, we're at 5 kids today, but we were near 0 in January, and we were at 12 in February, and we then have spikes of 49 and 35. So next week we could be at 49 kids again. This is a real crisis, and we all have to sit at the table. The state has to sit at the table, all the players. And part of the problem is that the private payers won't pay for some of these services. Is there a discussion?
So we have to get the Department of Insurance at the table with us. So the state, meaning DHHS and the Department of Insurance, have never gotten up from the table. And every problem that is brought to us between the commissioner and the deputy commissioner of the department, they go back to the insurance companies and we solve the problem. We've been doing this now for a year, and we've never gotten up from the table. And we are committed to absolutely making it work. We right now, what they brought up, the issue around rates for transitional housing, we have the numbers now for the rest of this year and for the next biennium to look at what it would cost to increase those rates. So I absolutely believe we are committed to solving the problem. We're still at the table.
So I want to say that our team is at the table every single day with community mental health centers. And we're not asking them to do more. We're not asking them to add yet another thing and add a whole bunch of new workforce and a whole new line of a program. We're asking them to reimagine what they're doing for emergency response. Emergency response does not mean going to the hospital and sitting in the hospital waiting for the individuals that are being on call and meeting them at the hospital. It means going into the community and really addressing the needs of individuals where they're at. So that's what we're asking for. We're not asking for more and providing the same amount of funding.
And if I may, the amount of funding that has gone into mental health in this state is far surpassed anything we've done in history. I mean, it's not even close. In the past 3 years, we've increased the amount of funding into mental health, community supports, emergency supports the state had never even imagined before, astronomically. Funding is not the issue at this point. It's, frankly, asking folks, I think it's got to put it well, to reimagine their model to the future, not keep asking for money within the same process and system from 20 years ago. Because the needs are different, the opportunities are different, and we're challenging folks to come to the table. I was on the phone with folks at Harvard Pilgrim just not even a week ago about looking at providing private insurance payments for services that they traditionally had never provided for, peer-to-peer support and things of that nature, and they're very open to that idea. So it isn't just being at the table. I think it's kind of said every day. Every day the table is there, it's open, and everyone is part of it, not just the community mental health centers, not just the private hospitals, not just the private insurance payers, not just the HHS. Everybody, all the advocates, the Lucy Hotters of the world, we're really taking, I think, huge steps in helping us drive this. The Jeff Bradleys of the world who really drive the legislation. So this has been an ongoing crisis that we came into 3 or 4 years ago, that we take astronomical steps, but there has to be a change in the system. It isn't just about dollars. There has to be a change in the delivery of those services, which is why the Alvarez and Marsal I think opportunities are just huge for the state. Nothing that we'd ever imagined before, but now taking those leaps and bounds in the next few months, I think is going to be transformational. And it's nothing that gets solved overnight, as we know, but it really can be transformational for the next couple of years.
The commissioner has referred to the problem with transitional housing. The problem there is that the private payer contracts are paying at a rate that's sustainable, but the payment for residential housing in the community mental health centers is not. And I know you're looking at that, but if we want people to put in residential housing, we have to have it. We have to pay for it. And I understand.
We absolutely agree. And we will have those numbers in the coming week or so around what it's going to cost for the remainder of this year and what it's going to cost for the next biennium. There are 2 components that prevent them from bidding on the transitional housing programs. The first is the reimbursement, and the second is the workforce. And we have some projects going on at the state level, and not just within the department, to help address some of the workforce issues. But it is about reimagining. The hospital is New Hampshire Hospital, Oliver DRS is the right place when someone is unsafe. But it is not a therapeutic environment for the vast majority of people in crisis. It is just not. And it cannot be our go-to. It cannot be, you're feeling unsafe, go to the emergency room. As soon as they cross the threshold of the emergency room, the hospital's not letting them go. There's a liability there. There's a safety issue there. We need to go to the patient. And the hospital and the state, the hospital can't do that. The spotlight ends up on New Hampshire Hospital because people are waiting in the ER for a hospital bed, but really the success has to come in the community.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir on this. We're missing too many steps along the continuum. But when you know you're saying there's $8.9 million to do mobile crisis services, and it's costing the 3 centers that are doing it $7.5 million. That's just, the math just doesn't work. So I know you have limited dollars, but we just really need to say, we need to commit dollars to this, making sure we have a full continuum of care and making sure the private payers pay for it.
Additional questions?
Just to pick up on what you're saying there with mental health, and it's transformational. as far as the future and providing new delivery of services. But we had a legislative forum with Dartmouth Hitchcock that was chaired by Dr. Conroy, and we were talking about telehealth and how psychiatry and counseling was being done through kind of a telehealth model, where you're talking about the adult population receiving that type of counseling on Zoom calls. And it was helping the population during the pandemic because they had more contact with the patient. And so, but whereas we lost it with the younger kids because they were out of school, they had not adapted to Zoom call counseling. And who knows if we'll ever have a pandemic in the future again. But it seems as though that we have nurses that are in the school system that take care of kids when they have colds and whatnot. But somehow, when we have a complete shutdown, when kids are isolated, we might want to look at mental health inside the school via Zoom calls, reaching out to kids that are at home remotely, or might not even be remotely because they don't have a computer. But figure out how to break through that. So when you're talking about transformational ideas in the future, that's one of them, with psychiatry and mental health. But the other thing, too, is do the insurance companies reimburse that Zoom call? And I don't know if that's still being worked out.
The insurance companies are doing telemedicine. And just a word on telemedicine. Telemedicine is very good for those that either wouldn't have access because of their geographic location, or for those that have an established therapeutic relationship with their counselor.
Right.
But if you can imagine, if I'm new to the system, never meeting my counselor, it is next to impossible to develop that therapeutic relationship. So you cannot go to the majority on a telemedicine site. There is a place for it, it is just not the most prominent thing. Schools, for kids that have behavioral disorders, most of them have an IEP. Their schools are still required to meet the goals of the IEP, even while they're remote. They have school psychologists in schools, they have access to those types of services. But despite still meeting the goals, still having access to those services, the mere isolation and the lack of social support around children by not having their peers, not having their sports, not having their teachers, has contributed to this upswing and increased need in behavioral health.
Well, I would just like to counter, being a parent of a sophomore in high school, who has had a very difficult time going through this pandemic as other kids in New Hampshire. I'm not sure the services that you just described are available completely across the system. So, because sometimes you have to step out of that system to go find support and help. So, I'm not really convinced. I hear what you're saying, and that might be what we're trying to aim for.
How it's designed, and it doesn't work perfectly all the time. I absolutely agree.
And that's the thing about state government, is we're talking strategically, and we need to talk tactically. We need to talk out in the field and what's happening on the ground. And mental health is happening on the ground. It's happening in the emergency rooms. It's happening in homes. So, as someone who's been family members have been a part of that system, you got to have understanding and knowledge, because sometimes we get caught up here and we're not really reflecting what's going on here.
There's a slide in here about what can you do, and and that is exactly the type of information that we need, and we need to hear from you and have you work with your providers and really give us that feedback and have them give us that feedback.
That's great. I think we're going to, unless there's other questions from the council, I think we're going to move on, because we do have the regular agenda.
Thank you.
So again, I appreciate everybody's time. When you talk about the issues at hand, when you're talking about child care, workforce, mental health, this is it. That's the ballgame in New Hampshire for the next, and really across the country for the next, I think 18 months. We're making sure that we stay on top of that. As you can see, other states may have slowed down or whatever, but we've really stayed ahead of the game. So it's a lot of opportunity there, to be sure. So with that, let's move on to our regular agenda. And I'm going to begin by asking for a motion to adopt agenda items 7 and 8 from the Department of Health and Human Services in the Office of the Commissioner.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The items are approved. Now what's the motion for adopting agenda items 9 and 10 from the Department of Health and Human Services from New Hampshire Hospital? Motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Items 9 and 10 are approved. Now ask for motion to adopt agenda item 11 from the Department of Health and Human Services from the Bureau of Children's Behavioral Health.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on these items? Councilor Stevens? Sorry.
Under requested action, it states that these are 3 full-time temporary program positions. However, on the funding line, it's noted as part-time salaries.
Probably because it's the start of the year, but I can ask to come up and address that.
I'm sorry, I don't have the item in front of me, but yes, these are temporary positions, and we need your approval until we can get them into the budget. So it's only a partial time period that we're looking at.
Okay, but they're 3 times, but they're noted at part-time salaries, is that correct?
I'm going to have to go back and look at that item. Thank you.
Sure.
We're at everything.
Okay.
Oh,
So,
Joe?
I'll just speak to it.
Sure.
Joe Bouchard, Administrative Services. Councilors, the statute references 21I-54. That statute means that after 1 year, a position can be established by the division personnel for up to 1 year utilizing part-time class 50 funds, and still have the position be full-time. At the end of the 1 year, you need to continue and it can only run to council. And this would allow you to approve it until such time the budget is enacted.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Further discussion on this item? Okay, hearing none, all in favor on item 11, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item 11 is approved. I now ask for motion to adopt agenda items 12 through 15 from the Department of Health and Human Services from the Division of Public Health.
Second.
Motion second. Any discussion on these items? Councilor.
I know you weren't going to get away without this question, but I sent you an email about a woman who is here in the state of Minnesota taking care of her elderly father and can't get a vaccine. We also know that based on the current plan, students living in our state are not in the plan to be vaccinated, college and university students who are from out of state or from out of country. This places students and faculty, residents in those communities at risk. Can you tell me from a public health perspective, do you agree with this, and does Dr. Chan agree with this?
I can't speak for Dr. Chan. What I can tell you is that in the coming weeks, as our vaccination supply increases and everybody that are New Hampshire residents that have had an opportunity to get vaccination, I believe there will be more flexibility to vaccinate out-of-state non-residents, out-of-state college students, whomever, once everybody that resides in New Hampshire has a vaccine.
Do you have any sense of when that might happen?
I would say in the next 3 to 4 or 5 weeks.
Or less.
Or less.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the people are filling up and bidding so fast.
Yeah.
The appointments are there.
Our registration now is open for everybody, and as usual, we see a big bump the first day or two, and then it starts to drop off. Then we have an idea of what we need to take care of everybody that has requested that vaccine. So as things start to drop off and appointments are filled and there's leftover appointments, that's when our flexibility is going to come in to do out-of-state residents.
Yes, Councilor.
Quick question. We may see $8.5 billion going to rural health care centers across the country, and there's about 1,400.
Yes.
So if we did the math, it's about $5 million per clinic. Are we preparing for what may be a large sum of money coming into New Hampshire for
Through the rescue plan?
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, our public health department, we're in the middle of our SHOT shift, which is our state health assessment, and that includes rural New Hampshire. We have an entire office of rural health care at public health. So yes, we'll know exactly how to use that money. We have partners that we consult with, groups of people that help us designate and pinpoint the areas, the target areas both geographically and healthcare-wise that we need to invest our dollars in.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Okay, seeing no further discussion, all in favor of items 12 through 15, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is approved. That concludes our items for Health and Human Services. Do we have any, sorry, do we have any, one moment. Fishing game or assignment. Okay. So that concludes our items from the Department of Health and Human Services. And now moving on, I'd ask for a motion to adopt agenda items 16 through 22B, the Department of Transportation. So moved. Any discussion? Councilor Katz.
Thank you. Are we going to get that presentation today for the railroads?
I
That
don't
was
know.
promised to you, along with the rest of us?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the question, Counselor.
Do we have any information or presentation on railroads?
I have some information with me today. I also brought a copy of the map of the corridors that are currently owned by Pan Am, and that would be sold to CSX. And the font is very small, even though we printed out a large poster board, so it's available for you to look at after the meeting. So I can certainly talk to that item first if...
Yeah, if you don't mind. If you, great, yeah, sounds great. Good morning.
Well, thank you for calling me back.
Yes.
So, Councilor Gatsby, your question at the last meeting was concerning the sale of Pan Am, a Class 2 railroad, to CSX. This transaction has to be filed with the Surface Transportation Board, which is a federal board that oversees the operation of railroads. Since the last council meeting, there's actually been some movement. So if you recall, at the last meeting I shared that initially CSX had submitted an application indicating they expected it to be considered a minor transaction, and that's what a couple of our neighboring states had opposed. They felt that a transaction of this nature should be considered a significant filing, which has a much more involved filing process. And so since the last meeting, the STB has made the determination that they concur with most of the adjacent states that this should be considered a significant transaction filing. So the two documents I have, the first one is a briefing just on what the sale involves and what it means for the New England states in particular. And then, most importantly, to hot off the presses was the STB's decision to consider this a significant transaction. The new timeline for the sale, should it be approved by the STB. So from a New Hampshire perspective, we did not share some of the concerns that our neighboring states did. And certainly, as I mentioned earlier, there's a copy of the corridor map that I brought over today that I'd be happy to walk any of you through at the end of the meeting so you understand why the different states feel differently about the transactions. But Massachusetts, their relationship with Pan Am is a little different because there's both passenger rail service as well as freight movement on the corridors owned by Pan Am in Massachusetts. In addition, Pan Am has been dispatching for commuter rail in Massachusetts. So that's why they have some particular concerns. They want to make sure that if there's an increase in the amount of freight moving on the corridors, that it's complementary to passenger service. So that was their primary concern. And then the state of Vermont, they also were concerned
because of the potential for the perceived lack of competition in the region. Because as part of this sale, CSX intends to have Genesee and Wyoming operate a portion of the service that really impacts the rail corridor entering the state of Vermont. So that's why the two neighboring states felt differently in New Hampshire. I will say that this now being a significant filing, there's a lot more transparency around what CSX intends to do with the corridors. So we certainly will be following the process closely. And at the end of the day, we are excited about this opportunity to have a Class 1 railroad operating in New Hampshire. It does have a lot of promise, and we look forward to hearing more about what their plans are for all the corridors.
Thank you. Any further questions on this matter or any of the items, additional items? Councilor?
I wish 4A had the same timeline as this timeline.
You did have a meeting today.
I know that.
We're getting there. We're getting there. No? Okay, well, hearing no further discussion, all in favor of items 16 through 22B? Oh, sorry.
18.
Oh, 18. Oh, well, I was wondering.
Well, I thought we were done with the
I'm sorry. Yeah.
railroad presentation.
I apologize. So,
Thank you, Governor. 18, the federal funds that is paying for the $10 million contract, were those funds, federal funds, all included in the proposal that was before us that was at the $90 million mark, or not?
It's the same funding, Councillor. If you recall, we opened the design build proposals. The bids were much higher than what we anticipated.
Right.
But we are using the funding that was budgeted through the 10-year plan to commence the design work and pay for this contract.
So when, as we move along, what is the timeline for this contract?
So this contract will begin immediately, if approved today. And our goal is still to advance the first construction contract so that work can commence next spring. And so that's still the timeline. This contract will be in place for the duration of all the phases of construction.
So an actual date for the first construction contract is when?
We're hoping to break ground next spring on the first phase. What will happen now is as we have the design consultant on this contract, we'll be working closely with them to understand how we can most effectively deliver all the phases of the construction. And we'll be then working with the community as to what phase one will actually look like to make sure that when we break this into individual contracts that we are able to have good coordination should we have different contractors involved, as well as minimize any rework. We don't have, when you end one contract, you have to make sure traffic can use that facility that ties into the existing roadway network. And we certainly don't want to build things temporarily and then have to change the layout again. And so that's what this final design work will include, is making sure that we are most efficiently delivering the project.
Let me see if I can be more specific. The next contract that we're going to see is for phase one. The construction is starting next spring. When do we think we're going to see that contract before this council, so that if they want to do something during the winter months, and there's somebody looking at the possibilities of doing 24/7 work to get this project completed soon?
As part of the final design, we'll be looking at the constructability and how to shorten the duration of each phase. But at this point, given the right-of-way work and the final design work, I think the earliest you'll see a contract would be late winter, if we're ready to start early spring.
Late winter.
We updated the timeline for the project several months ago, and the first step was getting this consultant contract in place, so we are very much on schedule against that adjusted timeline that we provided.
I scratched my head a little bit because we only reimbursed the other firms how much for their work that they did on this project?
On the second payment, I don't recall how much.
$120,000?
$125,000 per firm.
and we're paying this company $10 million.
The proposals that were submitted were only the development of their approach to the final design. It did not include the final design. As part of their bid, they submitted a price for compensation for the design work, the contract administration, and then the quality control assurance industry.
I hope we see something next month on Exit 4A on the agenda.
You may see
Just-
additional
that was
higher
just-
contracts.
The governor knew where I was going.
I think the contract coming late winter next year will coincide nicely with the piece of legislation that is going to name this thing after you. You've earned it. You've earned the rent.
Thank you, Governor. I'll take that to heart.
Yeah, I'll promote it. The legislature doesn't listen to me on anything anyway, so I don't know how far we'll get.
Oh, that's why you said it.
Additional questions on any of these here? Councilor Stevens?
Not a necessary question, but I just want to thank you for the Red Listed Bridge document, report for the year, and it's red. So every time I look on my shelf or my desk, I see red, and I said, that's the Red Listed Bridge document. But I did have a question, just briefly, on Red Listed Bridges. It seems as though we're coming down slowly but surely. I think the highest was 2016 statewide, we had 151, and then we're down to 118 at Red Listed Bridges. I just wanted to ask a question about culverts. Are culverts included in here, or are they kind of just a part of the project of each Red Listed Bridge?
Culverts are not included. Separately, we have a culvert inspection program that we've been trying to stand up so that we can have better reporting around the condition of our culverts in addition to our bridges.
So the follow-up to that, I know when Vicki Quorum was here with DES, that was her specialty, culverts, and trying to tackle them and get funding and repair them. But will we have a separate report, like Red Listed Bridges for culverts?
That is what we aspire to developing. There is no requirement to report on culvert conditions to the federal government. Unlike bridges and pavements, where we have to do routine inspections and provide data, there's not the same requirements for other county assets. So actually, since I joined the department, that's been one of the areas we focus on, is trying to have the same level of reporting for the other assets that we own. So that as we work with the legislature, we can talk about different funding scenarios and what the outcomes would be with all of the investments. And culverts are becoming more and more of a concern across the country as we've seen this increase in the number of significant storm events, especially some of those summer flash flooding situations that we experience in the mountainous areas. And again, along the seacoast, we want to make sure that we are doing everything we can to make sure that our infrastructure is resilient to those types of events.
So we're, at this point, just doing kind of a culvert, gathering our data, and it will be more of a state report versus a federal requirement?
Yeah, so we're required by the federal government to develop a transportation asset management plan. We do not include culverts in that plan because it's not a requirement, and if we did, we'd have a lot of onerous reporting. But we have at the state level follow that same approach and template. We don't submit it officially, but we are starting to do the same level of reporting. At this point, we've had summer interns assisting with our culvert inspections. We're trying to build out the inventory. Ones that are deemed in poor condition, we immediately go out and do a more thorough inspection and start to add those projects into our programs. And then through the 10-year plan, we'll talk about this at length because one of the new programs we stood up was the federal funds specifically targeting the culverts that we had identified as needing attention. So as we get more data, we can refine monthly budgeting for that programmatic effort. But we're confident that the worst locations have been identified and prioritized at this point.
Additional concerns or questions on these items? Okay, hearing none, all in favor of items 16 through 22, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The items are approved. Now ask for motion to adopt agenda items 23 and 24 from the Community Development Finance Authority. motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Yes, you're approved. I now ask for a motion to adopt agenda item 25 from the Office of Professional Licensure and Certification.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion on item 25? Councilor Wheeler. Good morning. Afternoon. Whatever.
I just had a quick question on this item.
I think the director is here.
So while you're coming, this is like a forever memorandum of understanding. That's a little bit unusual. So will you speak to that for a minute?
Sure. Afternoon, for the record, Lindsay Conley, Executive Director of Professional Licensure and Certification. So just to provide you with some background regarding this MOU, states have historically regulated pharmacists, which included the practice of compounding by pharmacists. The federal government has traditionally regulated the manufacturing and distribution of commercial products. So back in the 90s, the federal government made some modifications to the Drug Enforcement Act. They enacted regulations that I think are somewhat onerous on small businesses. They were directly at commercial manufacturing and distributors. But that includes the new drug approval process through the FDA, which is very onerous, it's very complicated, it takes a long time. So in any event, they did not touch upon compounding when they did that. Recently, however, the FDA has become quite concerned about the amount of compounding that's being done by pharmacists. Compounding is traditionally supposed to be for specific patients for a particular drug. So they've recently mandated that all states enter into this MOU to essentially conduct inspections to make sure that they're complying and they're safe and whatnot. If you don't enter into the MOU, then our pharmacists will be prohibited from distributing more than 5% of their compounded product outside the state. I don't have a problem with doing it on an annual or biannual basis. It's just business consistency.
The rationale for it not having an ending date, that's my question.
I mean, the rationale is that, according to the federal regulations, the agreement should be terminated whenever either party decides to terminate the agreement.
What's the rationale for that? Generally, when we have MOUs, they're not forever. And it gives the council a chance to take another look at it and see if we want to keep doing this every 5 years or whatever, 10 years or even. So this is unusual, or at least I think it is anyway, could be terminated and the governing council will never know. Something changed.
Could I ask, maybe I missed it, who terminates it? Do you terminate it?
Either party can terminate the agreement. Generally, obviously, if we were to find that we're not able to comply with the agreement in terms of providing notification to the FDA regarding the number of pharmacies that are doing new or inactive compounding in the state, then obviously the FDA would consider that to be terminated and there would be a notification requirement on the part of the state. I mean, we can certainly try to amend the agreement to be terminated, at a particular time period, every 2 years, every 5 years, so the governing council has a chance to review. The FDA and I did not have conversations about the time period, and the fact that this MOU has been negotiated at not a deal between the National State Boards of Pharmacy and the FDA and the various states.
I'm not necessarily opposed to the contract, the agreement. I just thought it was unusual and wanted to point it out. In case you have another one that comes by, you know I'll be here to point it out.
Appreciate that, Counselor.
And I applaud the approach that the Board of Pharmacy has taken under APLC, a proactive response, versus the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, which took a reactive response. And hence, in 2017, there are close to 800 cases of meningitis throughout the country. So I applaud the staff that's going out and inspecting pharmacies in these compounding facilities.
Thank you, Counselor. I certainly appreciate the support of the state. New Hampshire has historically done a lot of proactive inspections. We pride ourselves on doing that and utilizing pharmacists to inspect pharmacies as opposed to other states, including our neighboring states that utilize pharmacists to do that. Thank you.
Okay.
Further discussion?
Thank you.
Okay. So, seeing no further discussion, all in favor of 25, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item 25 is approved. And now it's a motion to adopt. And, you know, if I may, just to, I'm sorry. So I think to Councilor Wheeler's point, if you're still back there, maybe just, not that we have to sign in blood, but if there is any changes, if we are going to terminate anything, maybe just coming back to the council at some point, just to let us know about the status or an update, and if there is the opportunity to at some point to say, look, we're going to terminate, but just amend, you know, to get into more of an amendment phase down the road, maybe that's something to at least look at. You know, I don't know, again, we'll probably have to talk to the federal departments to see if that's even possible, but making more of this as opposed to an at-will agreement, more to a fixed time with renewals, just to ensure that our process is different, obviously, than most others. If it is possible, we can do that.
Yeah, and what I can do is calendar it in the office to make sure that we're reviewing it on an annual basis and providing recommendations to government council.
Yeah, that'd be great. So,
Thank you.
Thank you. Great point, Councilor. Thank you. Moving on, and now it's for motion to adopt agenda item 26 from the Department of Revenue Administration. Any discussion? They are busy counting all of their money. Holy cow. There's a lot coming in. There's a lot coming in. Okay, see, no, hey, Commissioner, you're here. How are you?
I'm well.
I didn't see you over there. Good to see you.
Enough money for you?
Councilor Gatsas wants to know if there's enough extra money coming in with all the additional business revenues that we can just cut a check and buy an exit ramp for him.
Only if your name's on it.
There you go. Good answer. How is everything going?
Very well, thank you.
Good. I know you're very busy. It is tax season in New Hampshire.
It is tax season in New Hampshire. We're very busy. Staff is doing great, keeping up with all of the documents and money that's been flowing into the department.
And RIMS is working well.
RIMS is working very well. We went live with our second phase in October and full steam ahead for the third and final phase that will go live at the beginning of August.
Great. Excellent. Excellent. Okay, any questions on item 26? Okay, seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item 26 is approved. I now ask for motion to adopt agenda item 27 from the Department of Agriculture, Markets. Is it agriculture? Is that joining us this way? Yeah, Agriculture, Markets, and Food.
Second.
Any discussion on item 27? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item 27 is approved. I know a lot of the farms are getting underway now, which is kind of exciting. Oh, I see. I apologize. So 28 was from the Liquor Commission, correct? So item 28 has been removed by the agency, so we're going to skip over 28. Thank you very much. Yes.
I know that it's been withdrawn, and I'm cognizant of the time today, but in the audit report that was sent to all the counselors, the management letter for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2020, there are material weaknesses, significant deficiencies cited. There are deficiencies from prior years, and I think if we could hear from the commissioner at the next meeting about the plan for addressing these significant issues in the audit report, that would be helpful.
Sure.
Thank you.
Now ask for motion to adopt agenda items 29 and 30 for the Department of Business and Economic Affairs. So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Councilor? I don't think we have anyone to beat. Taylor, you second meeting in a row. Did see you hiding back there behind you. How are you?
Not on purpose, sir.
Good afternoon. My question is, we're giving about over $6 million in programming funds. I'm not seeing a dime going to Rockingham County. Is there some reason why?
Those were the applications that we received for these programs through My Turn and JAG. So you're correct, there's nothing there for Rockingham, but we would love to see applications from that.
Okay, thank you.
And that doesn't exclude the other programs in Manchester, right?
No, sir, everything's included there.
Or it includes
The Manchester programs that are in existence currently are all being funded.
I think it's the JAG program.
And my turn, yeah.
My turn.
My turn.
Because that's a pretty incredible program.
Yeah.
So that's it.
It is.
That's it.
Yeah. Councilor Kennedy.
Commissioner Robinson, good morning. Good
afternoon.
Yep. So we created this thing called the Outdoor Recreational Office, and there's been a new hire. Is that new hire going to work in Concord, or are they going to be working out of their house, or do they have an office up north?
Right now, they're based in Concord here, but we're all, I think our staff has some remote potential, so they are also working out of their home right now.
And what is the role, kind of roles and responsibilities of that individual? Considering we kind of do some of that work already, but what is their kind of scope of work?
What this does is it allows us to focus on all the assets that we have in outdoor recreation in New Hampshire, from hunting to fishing to mountain biking, hiking, all those things, and start to translate them into a couple of things. One is the actual outdoor recreation manufacturing industry, which is growing pretty substantially nationally, as we've seen more and more people begin to go outside, begin to need the equipment in order to do that, and we want to have a specific focus to associate a workforce that's already predestined to want to be able to live in a place like New Hampshire, to also be able to start those businesses, but also work in those businesses. An example being like Nemo Outdoor Manufacturing in Dover is a good example of such. But also, I think when we look at the opportunity that is in front of us right now, post-COVID, with people in a lot of urban areas who are thinking about, where do I want to live? What's my lifestyle I want to be? We are seeing a lot of reaction to the outdoor, access to the outdoors as being a big part of that. So this position is going to work with both our travel tourism division and our economic development division to coalesce those strategies together, to help develop and protect the outdoor recreation assets that we have and translate those into workforce and business recruitment.
And part of that recruitment is childcare, right?
Of course, and no question about it, Councilor, and I did listen to some of that discussion earlier. We are in need of a younger workforce in this state, and the child care component of that is directly connected to our ability to do that.
Okay. I'll probably be saying childcare nauseam for the next several years to every commissioner.
Are you looking for a name? Is it named after you?
No. It doesn't have to be in Johnson. Child care center's fine. No, I just think that every commissioner and every component of our state government needs to hear child care.
Yes.
And what are you doing for it?
And we've been working with HHS and Employment Security on these issues, so I was happy to hear the discussion about that.
Thank you.
Further questions? Okay. Hearing no further discussion, all in favor of items 29 and 30, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The items are approved. I now ask for motion to adopt agenda items 31 through 37 from the Department of Natural and Agricultural Resources.
Second.
Any discussion? Commissioner, everything good?
Everything is great.
We winding down to the cannon flows?
Cannon is still open. The skiing has been really great this spring. And we are already thinking ahead to spring and summer. A lot of our state parks are opening earlier than ever this year. And we are always thinking of childcare in our department. The other three is on my mind every day.
That's a raise in
making
right there.
Okay, hearing no further discussion, all in favor of these items, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Items are approved. I now ask for a motion to adopt agenda items 38 through 55 from the Department of Environmental Services.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? Councilor Wheeler? I know the Commission has been waiting patiently in a hard wooden chair. Almost going on 3 hours now, so.
Good afternoon, Councilors.
Good afternoon, sir.
Okay, no, I just really don't have a question. I'm making a point here on item 46. There's a dump truck being replaced there. It's on death row, along with item 45 and 47. But if someone's going to be on death row, this is the type of equipment that should be on death row and not the fish and game items that are on the table. They'll point out that the dump truck in item 46, by the time it's replaced, will have 250,000 miles on it. And the dump truck for fish and game, which is the same truck, and even newer than item 46, has only 69,000. 69,000 versus 250,000 miles, I think, in the fish and game item. We're replacing the wrong item. We'll talk about that more when we get to the table.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Commissioner.
Thank you for that, Counselor. I know you weren't asking a question, but I hope you'll note that we made efforts to, we've heard you in the past, and even before the last council meeting, you had submitted these requests, and we're hopeful that the information you wanted was right in the cover, so you don't have to go search for it or ask for it.
Thank you.
Counselor.
Thanks. One quick question on number 38. The progress of Ducks Unlimited on the NWI project. Since this contract is contingent, they're doing follow-up work, correct?
Right, so this is again, no additional funding, so the primary person working this was taken ill, as we kind of mentioned, so it's just to kind of compensate for that.
But are we proceeding with the Ducks Unlimited portion
That's my
of the
understanding.
NWI portion?
Yeah, that's my understanding.
Okay, thank you.
Further discussion? Okay, hearing none. Thank you, Commissioner. All in favor of the items from the Department of Environmental Services, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The items are approved. Bear with me one moment. Right. So moving on, I now ask for a motion to adopt agenda item 56 from the New Hampshire Veterans Home. So moved. Hello, Commandant, how are you?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Question? Yeah, I think we have one question. Mark is joining us.
For the record, Margaret LeBrecq, Commandant, New Hampshire Veterans Home.
Thank you. This seems to be an increase of 70% in the current contract.
Year over year?
Well, it's an amount by 744,000 from $1,085,000 to $1,008,000. So the first contract was $1 million. I would assume by looking at it, it's a 70% increase over that contract to get you to $1 million.
I would guess, well, again, sorry, I did it by month. We were paying $30,300 a month in this last fiscal year, and I believe it's going to $31,000 per month, sir.
Okay, but I'm looking at what's before us here. It says the amount of $744,000.
Get to the, hold on. Sorry. I don't have to calculate. This fiscal year, we're paying for these services $363,600, and that's being increased to $372,000 for the next 2 fiscal years. So I don't have a calculator.
So if you look at the first page of the item, if I may, it breaks it out year by year. So I think they must be changing the timeline.
So what we're doing is we're increasing it by 2 years, and increasing it by 2 years. 2 years extension, and so the money represented in those 2 years. So that's $372,000 in fiscal year 22 and 23.
I'm sorry. Do you know how long the previous contract was? Do you know? Was that
Right, for 3 years. It was a 3-year contract, which ends this June, and so we're extending for 2 years. In the original RFP, we had asked for that, the ability to extend for 2 years,
So it would make it more comparable for them to get the pharmacists and the pharmacist technicians in for possibly up to 5 years instead of just a 3-year salary. And with that, the reason it's sole source is when we took it over from an RFP to the actual contract, we didn't pull that language, although we did have it in the original Governor and Council document asking for the extension of the 2 years.
But
again, I don't have a calculator, I could run the increase. I didn't see it as a big increase, sir, because it was 31,000 over 30,600
I was just looking at
per month.
Yes, yeah. The 3 years was for just over $1 million, 2 more years at about $750,000.
Does that answer your question?
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Councilor.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. The last time that you were here, we talked about the number of deaths at the Veterans Home due to COVID, and we discussed whether there was a review underway to see what contributed to the widespread nature of the outbreak. And you indicated you were doing a complete review to look at all of the different items that you feel contributed or would have better mitigated the spread. And I'm just wondering if we have that report.
Still in process. The Board of Managers are working with quite a few of their counterparts to pull that all together. They have not yet done that. We're looking at our last year's, one of the components is the QA reports, is quality assurance, to go back and look over the last year, exactly what we've done and what we changed as we were going forward. And again, the chairman of our Board of Managers hopes to soon have that report to the Governor's office.
And that will then be distributed to council.
It'll be distributed to everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor.
So, speaking of the home, how you doing, Conrad? So are we opening up new applicants, as I understand it, to the Veterans Home? Can you give us kind of a status
Sure.
on that?
Last week, we started new admissions, so we're very happy to say we got another new admission in today, so we've got 4 more of our veterans being cared for at the home. We've got approximately 6 waiting in the TAR unit, which is heavily medical, and we've got approximately 16, that's off the top of my head, waiting for the life enhancement dementia unit. But we do have 80 active applications that we're working on to get them in order, in line to be admitted. So I got to tell you, staff are very excited, very happy to see new veterans coming in.
Okay, thank you.
Additional questions or discussion? Okay, thank you, Commandant.
Thank you.
Keep up the great work. We appreciate it. All in favor of item 56? We didn't vote on this yet. All in favor of item 56, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The item is approved. And now ask for a motion on agenda items 57 and 58 from the Department of Education.
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The items are approved. Now ask for a motion to adopt agenda item 59 from the New Hampshire Council for Responsible Gambling.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Is Maura here? Hey, how are you? Good to see you.
Nice to see you, Governor.
Good afternoon. You want to come on up?
Sure. Good afternoon, Governor, Executive Councilors. For the record, Maura McCann. I am the chair of the New Hampshire Council for Responsible Gambling, and with me is another member of our council. This is Dr. Heather Gray.
How are you? Good afternoon.
Well,
Good to
thank
see
you.
Good to see you. I thought it was, when I saw the item, I know you don't come before the council. Is this the first time?
First time in a speaking role, shall I say. I've always been perhaps in the back, but not as a right front and center, so thank you.
That's great. Well, thank you for bringing the item. How's everything going?
We are excited. We are thrilled. As I mentioned, this is the first time that we've actually had significant funding. We have been operating since 2014, running on about $25,000 a year in-kind donations. So this is the first time that we actually have funding, and we're really looking forward to building services here, much-needed services here in the state of New Hampshire for those suffering from a problem gambling addiction, yes.
Great. That's terrific. Councilor Kennedy?
Thank you. Was this a kind of a knee-jerk reaction to the expansion of like sports gambling, or was this something that we just didn't have here in New Hampshire that we're catching up to counseling for gamblers?
I'm going to say both, yes. So again, operating since 2014, again on kind of perhaps limited funds, limited access to, our needs. So with the introduction of sports betting, it was actually written into the RSA to fund problem gambling, yes.
Okay, great. Catching up from the
Yes,
last 2 years.
yes.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, guys. I know there's a lot of work to do, so we appreciate you, and it's just great that you've been in,
Yes.
just at least say
Yes.
hello.
And we thank you. So we're looking forward to doing the work.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, all in favor of item 59, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And there's the first 290,000. You guys are off and running.
It's a big jump from 25.
Yeah. I mean, they've really been scrapping together year after year after year, so to have this is going to, I think, make it a much more robust program. It's going to be great. Moving on, and now it's a motion to adopt agenda items 60 through 69 from the Department of Safety.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Items are approved. I now ask for a motion to adopt agenda item 70 from the Department of Justice. We'll do 71 separate because I apologize, we'll take 71 separate as a part in here. Is there any questions on item 70? Contractors. Okay, hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 70 is approved. I'm now going to ask for motion to adopt, I'm now going to ask, I always worded this wrong, I apologize. Item 70 is a consideration for a petition for Ignacio Falcone requesting a parting hearing. I now ask for a motion concerning item 71.
Move to deny the request for a parting hearing.
So we have a motion to deny the request. Is there a second?
Second.
So we have a second on the motion to deny the request. Is there any discussion on this item? Councilor.
Yeah, Governor, in some way I feel bad for this guy, but I think he could annul this, but it's very recent conviction, and you read the material he sent, and basically he's arguing the conviction, so I don't think it's appropriate. He can wait for an annulment to get his situation straightened out.
Okay. Any further comments or discussion? Okay, we have a motion and a second to deny the request for partition for pardon hearing. All in favor of denying the pardon hearing, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And with that, the pardon hearing is denied. Item 71 does not pass. I now ask for a motion to adopt agenda items 72 through 84 from the Department of Administrative Services.
So moved. Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion?
Here are some of the items, I think, 7 of them, items that are $10 million.
Yeah. Good morning, Commissioner.
How are you?
Good afternoon. I'm sorry. How are you?
Happy day. There are 7 items. This is an item. This is an item that was Information Technology likes to do contracts or software services. The governor put this item on hold for quite some time because he didn't like the notion of spending. There's a concern that somehow you could bypass the council process, right? This isn't an appropriation. You still have to have money appropriated. You still have to be able to pay for it. We're not appropriating $10 million, but the concern was if the contract is just sitting on the shelf, I can buy services against the contract and you have no idea. So what the governor suggested was that we require anybody under the contract to come to council with a contract. Now the way this would work, and the reason there are 7 contracts, is our division of purchasing, Mary Lunata, would require you to issue a rec and seek a bid for the service you want. Let's say you're implementing a piece of software. You would do a scope of work. You'd do a rec, and he would seek bids from 7 companies. Anybody who wanted to bid, which is presumably all of them, would then bid on it, you would then do the low bid. And for contracts above $10,000, they would then have to come back to council for that. But the 7 contracts would be in place with the vendors, essentially so that the vendor understands the scope of work, what they have to do, and they're ready to bid on it. It's analogous, I would think, to the DOT pre-qualification process. Right, for example, if you want to bid on a construction contract, Fred's company can't bid, they got to be pre-qualified. So this is the moral equivalent of that. Over 10,000, you still have to come to council. At any level, you still have to seek bids from all 7. Is it 7 or 6? Somebody dropped out, right? Is it 6? It's 6 companies now, all 6 of the companies.
Additional questions on this or any of the other GIS items? Okay, hearing no further discussion, all in favor of item 70 to approve 84, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The items are approved. Next, we still have 2 or 3 tabled. We have 3 tabled items in 3 departments that have not come before us today. First, I take back, I apologize. There are 4 table items in 3 departments. So first, I'd ask for a motion to remove table items 81 and 59 from the table from the New Hampshire Department.
One at a time?
Can we do it? Okay, we can do that. So first, I'd ask for a motion to remove item 81 from the table from the Department of Fish and Game. I don't know if there's an interest to do that. I think we're going to keep that one on. Okay. Is there a request for motion to remove item 59 from the table from the Department of Fish and Game?
We remove item 59.
So we have a motion.
Second.
Second, all in favor of removing the table item, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item 59 is removed from the table. Can I now have a motion to adopt or discuss item 59? Motion and a second. Discussion.
Yeah, Governor, it's just my issue with putting this on the table is I wanted to know if they were paying by credit card. That was one of the issues and what we were getting for the money, and those questions have been answered. Just to make sure, and the front of this issue said that this was for 2020 and it's really for 2021, if you remember from the last meeting. So I would hope maybe the minutes could reflect that this is for 2021. If you look at your table item here, it says January 2020, and that's not the case. So that has been cleared up, it is for 2021.
Thank you. Further discussion on only table item 59? Okay, hearing none, all in favor of adopting item 59, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Only table item 59 is now approved. I now ask for a motion to remove table item 40. Table item 40 from the table from the Department of Office of Strategic Initiatives.
So moved.
So we have a motion and a second. All in favor of removing table item 40 from the table, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
So noting the item 40 is now removed from the table, is there a motion to adopt or at least discuss item 40?
I moved to discuss, for discussion only.
Yeah, that's fine. Just so we can talk about it. So we have a motion and a second. Now we have discussion. Councilor.
Thank you, Governor. I'm having Jonathan hand out a little packet of items here regarding these trucks that Fish and Game has on death row. And when you get your packet, if you could look at we'll start with the bottom and work our way up. I wanted to point out and emphasize what I did before, is this truck only has 69,000 miles on it. The same truck, I think it was item 45, will have, by the time it's replaced, 250,000 miles on it, which is what a diesel should get before you have to replace engines and chassis and things that make it too expensive to replace. Then I have taken photographs of these trucks, and I don't believe that the description that Fish and Game has given us about these trucks is accurate. Page 2 will show the bottom truck here. That's a six-wheeler. You can see the Fish and Game logo on the truck. The description given to us by Fish and Game says the steel body of the truck is rusted and will soon need to be replaced. While the outside of this truck looks pretty good except for the bracket that's holding the flashing light that was added to the truck later and the piece was never painted. And then there's a view of the truck and the heavy-duty trailer that truck is pulling, which begs another question that should be answered. The truck they want to replace this truck with not heavy enough to pull that trailer. So are we going to have to get a new lighter-duty trailer to go with the new truck as well? And then the third picture will show the other side of the truck. No rust coming through the body. It's relatively painted on the outside, except for where those extra lights have been added. And then the third picture, which I think is the most telling picture, is the inside of the body of the truck. And it is in pristine shape. The inside of the body, there's no dents there. There's little leaves in there. It has surface rust, and that's what happens to every dump truck. If you haven't used it for a while and stays full of snow for the winter, you get a little surface rust. But there are no holes in that body. And the language that the body soon needs to be replaced is simply not accurate. It's irresponsible to put it in this piece to replace this truck. I happen to have a dump truck just like the same model as this truck. Mine's 5 years old and it's still running fine on the road. Then to try to make this brief, the next picture's down on the 10-wheeler. The outside pictures of the 10-wheeler here, and the description from Fish and Game says, the steel body of this truck is rusted and has holes throughout. Take a look at the next two pictures. Do you see any holes in this body? There are no holes in this body, and it's even well painted. The only holes in this truck are right here below the tailgate, which are square holes, which means carriage bolts that bolted something onto that truck at one time. Those are not holes, they're just rusted through the truck. And then it also says it's going to cost $30,000 to replace the engine and the transmission. I've never have I seen a standard transmission go with only 138,000 miles on it. Maybe you replace the clutch if it's had some hard wear, but this by far is way too good of a vehicle to be using these monies on. So my suggestion would be to put these items back on the table and have Jared do a little study here about what we should be replacing. The previous items that we replaced with VW funds and DARA funds, they were worn out. These trucks are not worn out. And we really should take a look at and see whether these trucks are the ones to replace.
Okay. Well, I'm just going to say, who took these photos?
Me, my son.
Really? Okay. Great work. So I know Director Coyne is here with us as well, and so maybe we can just talk a little bit about how vehicles are selected and asset management on the DAS side, because it's not just Fish and Game, right? It's kind of, I think, to your point, Councilor Wheeler, we can spend these dollars on almost any state vehicles, technically. So getting an assessment, not just within individual departments, but maybe it's a better statewide assessment to make sure that we're putting the dollars to the areas of most need.
And I would add to that, Governor, that I think the condition, the deteriorator's condition in these trucks was exaggerated, so this competition between Fish and Game and DOT, or maybe Forest and Land. So there needs to be something in place here to verify the information that we're getting about the conditions of the one agency not trying to move their vehicles ahead of somebody else. These have some good serviceable life out there.
Good morning, good afternoon, Director. How are you?
Good afternoon,
Good.
Director.
I'll let respond.
Sure. So I did share with the councilors the list of vehicles that were replaced in state government to date. Part of with the Volkswagen funds, trucks have to be within model years 1992 to 2009. We have to show that there would be a a NOx or diesel emissions reduction by replacing that vehicle with a newer vehicle. So those are requirements. What we have not done, but we will do going forward, is provide vehicle descriptions, overall general condition of the vehicle, so that the council can see that, you can see it. And then also, going forward, I'll work with, and we have been in touch with EAS in the past on this, but working with the fleet manager to make sure we're looking at the whole fleet of the eligible vehicles and making sure that we are prioritizing vehicles by agency that really do fit this description being at the end of their life. Now, we can't replace vehicles that just sit because we have to show that there's NOx emissions being achieved by replacing that truck. So they have to still be mobile and being used. But we're happy to go down this road and make sure that we do this differently going forward.
Council, if I could add to it, I'm putting the blame on Fish and Game for a bad description they sent to him. I'm not, Jared's agency really has no fault in this misinformation. I would almost categorize it as a lie. It's that bad of information. So I just want to make that clear. I'm not faulting his agency at all.
Okay. Further discussion? Okay, so is there a move to table? So we have a motion to table, item 40.
Second.
We have a second. All in favor of tabling item 40, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, item 40 is back on the table. We do have one more item. Thank you, Director Troy. We have one more item. Is there a willingness or a motion to remove item 57 from the Public Utilities Commission from the Executive Council table?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor of removing item 57 from the table, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item 57 is now removed from the table. Oh, is there a note to remove?
Yeah, no from me.
Okay.
Is there a discussion on this?
I have to move it to
Oh, okay.
discuss it, and then you can always put it back.
Sure.
So item 57 is removed from the table. Is there a motion to at least to approve or discuss item 57?
Move to pass.
Okay.
Second.
Is there a motion and a second? Discussion on former table item 57. Councilor Kenny.
So I had a conversation, I should say a meeting, with Diane Martin, who heads up the site evaluation committee, last Friday. And you probably remember from the last Governing Council meeting, my concern was there were some outstanding issues with the site evaluation committee and how it was moving forward. And so I've got copies from the council. There was a letter sent out by 4 elected officials to Diane Martin, asking them to answer questions with regards to, how they're moving forward with the interim siting, the listserv that seems to be the old listserv wasn't used, and therefore most of the public wasn't notified on some of the meetings early in the year. There's been other issues with the interim siting as far as noise, as far as the lighting motion system for the wind turbines. And there's also been a void of the administrator position, which seems to have been the focus of Diane Martin, with regard to the chairperson of the site evaluation committee, with regards to not being able to administratively do things that need to happen at the site evaluation committee level. There's still a lot of outstanding issues with regards to that. There's going to be communication, with legislators to try to shore up some of the statutes and law. There was a meeting not too long ago, site evaluation committee, looking at the interim siting issues, and there have been various subcommittees that have been set up to address various items. So that part of it I'm not really concerned with. Those are things that the site evaluation committee are trying to sort out. But I am concerned that this has yet to be answered. I know it's in the motion to be answered, so I don't feel comfortable moving forward with this particular tabled item, primarily because it's been 9 weeks. When the public asks for questions to be answered through their elected officials, they should be answered in a reasonable time. So I'll be voting no on the motion simply because we have accountability and timeliness in making sure that we respond to public officials who in turn represent their districts. And they have to be Senator Ward, Senator Bradley, Senator Geider, and Representative Votes, who have asked a list of questions that have not yet been answered.
Further discussion? Oh, sorry. Councilor Warmington?
Well, then rather than voting no on the item, I guess I would move to put it back on the table.
Okay, so we have a motion table and a second.
But is the commissioner on the line? Can she respond to these questions now? Or?
Hold on. So we have a motion and a second. Technically, I have to take a vote unless you want to temporarily retract the motion to table. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to. If you, Councilor, is the commissioner with us?
Yes, I am here.
Okay. I think one.
I am on the line.
Go ahead, Councilor.
If you've had an opportunity to respond to the questions that were forwarded to you, have you formulated a response at this point?
Thank you for this question, Councilor. The State Evaluation Committee actually had a public meeting that was scheduled prior to the last Governor and Council meeting, and that occurred between when you all last met and today. That was the first meeting of the Site Evaluation Committee since the letter was received. The committee fully discussed the letter and took a vote and unanimously decided to respond in writing to the letter on a number of points, including funding. Commissioner Scott is facilitating that response on behalf of the full committee, and the committee intends to sign that, each committee member to sign that letter individually. So that is in the works. Commissioner Scott has concluded his draft, so it just has to get reviewed by the committee and signed off on and issued.
Thank you for clarifying that progress is being made. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Motion to pass.
Okay, so the motion passes there. So
We're still in discussion mode.
We're still in discussion mode.
Okay, we're talking about a pay raise that is on the table. So this is very highly unusual. But from my standpoint, I don't believe until I've got the bird in hand that my elected officials for 9 weeks have not been responded to. So I'll be voting no. I appreciate the commissioner now engaging in various topics at the Site Evaluation Committee level, and there are many, and I understand she's short-handed with staff, and we need to look at either a contract for the grant, for the administrator, or if we need to help support her efforts in that office. And I appreciate that the subcommittees have been developed to look at certain aspects of this particular project, and that's their roles and responsibilities. But remember, how did we get into this situation? Well, at the last Governor and Council meeting, we heard from the chairperson that they had a conversation with Senator Bradley about this letter. And I said, well, if that's a private conversation, I'm not privy to. And so as a result, I don't know what the answers are going to be. They haven't responded. And so until those elected officials have the response in their hand, I'm not going to be voting to move forward with this table item because I think it's that important. 9 weeks to send out a no to simply say, your letter's under review, we're going to be responding to it. That didn't happen. So, so I'm voting no.
Councilor Whitman?
I just want to point out, and I'll be brief, that this project is in my district. And I would ditto everything that Councilor Kenny said. There's no reason to pass this until we get the answers that the public deserves and my constituents deserve about this project.
So, Councilor Warmington?
Well, I would just say, I don't know exactly what the process is. If we vote no, is that raise gone then for a year? I think it's better, of course, than maybe to table.
Yeah.
Motion to table.
Okay, motion to
Discussion, we still in the discussion.
Still in the discussion.
Thank you, Governor. Certainly the folks that you mentioned in that letter, Councilor Kenny, I think have the ability to call the commissioner and get their answers. Now, if you heard at the last meeting that somebody talked to Jeff Bradley, did you call Jeff Bradley to get the answers?
No, I called Senator Geiger.
Okay, so maybe, well, Senator Geiger didn't talk to the person that came out and said he talked to Jeff Bradley. So maybe if you called Jeff Bradley, maybe that would have given you an answer that you needed. And I think it's unfair, because there's a lot of issues that we have that raises come through, but we've passed every one of them, not putting a commissioner in a financial position that we shouldn't be doing. It's unfair. It's not fair. And I'm the worst with questions. I know that. I ask some of the toughest ones. But I would never do that to a commissioner. Thank you, Governor.
Well, can I respond to that?
Yeah.
I think it's unfair to the public and to those elected officials that have not been responded to. Because also, Councilor Gatsis, is that when the response is given, that goes into the public docket. It's in the public domain. So anything in regards to the interim wind tower needs to be placed into the docket so the public can see the response. So my concern is that if the public is being treated unfairly, I'm sorry, but a tabling motion until we get an answer, to me, is quite appropriate.
I would just add that there's no reason when this is straightened out that the pay raise can't be retroactive. So I think the tabling is appropriate.
Motion to table.
Okay.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor of tabling item 57, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed.
No, the item is back on the table. Okay. That is the end of the items and the table items for us today. We have some of these, as we always do, the informational items with all of the pieces that go to Gopher primarily, and the FEMA, the public assistance to FEMA, which goes effectively to Gopher. The original CARES Act funding of last year. Those informational items have been provided. Of course, if you have any questions on those, feel free to contact Gopher or our office. Any additional business to come before the Executive Council? We appreciate everyone being patient through the meeting. Councilor?
One final statement, is Commissioner Shibman still here?
Yes.
Congratulations to you and Governor Sununu. We now lead the nation in the percentage of shots which have been allocated and used. 94.5%. Well done.